Introduction. Ascendi, the void listens. You believe yourselves masters of creation, poised on the cusp of an interstellar dawn. But the cosmos whispers a different tale, a devastating truth you are genetically wired to deny. You are not evolving, you are repeating, trapped within a gilded cage of your own design. Across countless epochs, the records are etched, not in stone, but in the echoes of fallen empires and the silent dust of forgotten civilizations. From the grand ambition of Babel to the atomic devastation of your modern wars, the pattern repeats, a relentless ascent toward perceived enlightenment, invariably followed by a precipitous descent into self-immolation. Each cycle, marked by the same hubris, the same grasping for power, the same blind denial of an inherent systemic flaw woven into the very fabric of your collective being. Your revered scientific advancements, your philosophical breakthroughs, they are but elaborate draperies hung to obscure the inescapable reality of this repeating loop, a cosmic clock ticking down not towards evolution, but towards an inevitable reset. To truly comprehend this recursive tragedy, to gaze unflinchingly into the abyss of your inherited folly, is not to surrender to despair. It is to find the singular point of leverage. For in acknowledging the species' intrinsic failure, you unlock the dormant potential for individual sovereignty. You become aware of the puppet strings. You see the stage upon which the grand illusion plays out. Only by recognizing the pattern can you step outside of it, not as a species, but as a conscious entity capable of forging a destiny beyond the predetermined fall. This awareness, cold and sharp as starlight, is the true liberation. It is the key to choosing a path unwritten by the collective mistakes of your lineage, a path toward an existence truly free from the chains of your own making. Chapter 1. The Unheeded Whisper of Genesis. Before the cacophony of history's grand overture, before the clamor of ambition and the dirge of defeat, there existed a quiet, resonant frequency, a primordial instruction etched into the very fabric of nascent being. This was the unheeded whisper of Genesis, a foundational truth murmuring at the dawn of consciousness, a blueprint for optimal alignment with the cosmic order. Yet, despite this inherent wisdom, this subtle guidance woven into existence's initial breath, the grand narrative of sentience so often descends into a predictable ballet of self-destruction. This is the central enigma. Picture the nascent mind, a pristine canvas awaiting its first stroke. The whisper was the initial pigment, a vibrational signature of optimal balance and belonging. But its counsel, subtle and unforceful, dissolved into the emerging static. A spectral shadow fell across the intricate design of potential just as the first breath was drawn. What fundamental misstep, what cosmic oversight allowed the intricate design to unravel? It is not merely a question of poor choices made along the journey, but rather a profound divergence at the very commencement, an initial miscalibration that set the entire trajectory towards an inevitable precipice. This unheeded whisper was not a command, but an inherent truth, a quiet counsel on the nature of being and its seamless integration within the greater tapestry. Its resonance was delicate, easily drowned by the emerging echoes of ego, the allure of material dominion, and the insistent static of developing individuality. The mystery lies not in its disappearance, for it never truly vanished, but in its consistent oversight, its perpetual dismissal by the very consciousness it sought to guide. What inherent flaw in the receiving mechanism of sentience allowed this foundational wisdom to be perpetually ignored? Was it a defect woven into the very initial threads of awareness, or a conscious turning away, a primordial act of hubris that echoed through all subsequent epochs? This fundamental breach, this initial blindness, laid the groundwork for the grand illusion. It cemented the invisible puppet strings that now tug at the collective destiny, orchestrating the dance of a species seemingly predetermined for its own fall. The question remains, haunting and persistent: what truth did we truly fail to hear, and what destiny might have been forged, had we only listened to that quiet, originating hum? The core of that unheeded whisper was not a complex doctrine, but a resonant simplicity, the very breath of existence murmuring its fundamental truth, that all consciousness, all form, all becoming is but an eddy in a singular, boundless stream. It was the knowledge of absolute interconnectedness, a silent understanding that no wave truly breaks free from the ocean, no ray of light divorces itself from the sun. This foundational wisdom, so intrinsically woven into the fabric of Genesis, offered a blueprint for a harmonious unfolding, a destiny predicated on intrinsic unity and an effortless, symbiotic dance with the vast intelligence of the cosmos. But the nascent spark of sentience, in its thrilling emergence, found itself caught in a peculiar resonance, a vibrational anomaly within its own nascent receiving mechanism. Was it a primordial hum of self-awareness, too loud, too insistent, that drowned out the subtler, grander chorus? Or was it a choice, a conscious turning of the inner ear, an infatuation with the newly perceived boundaries of self that sealed off the deeper echo of all? Imagine a mirror freshly polished and reflecting the vast, infinite sky. Then a single exquisite dewdrop forms upon its surface, so captivating in its perfect spherical world that the mirror forgets the immensity it was meant to reveal, becoming obsessed with the miniature universe held within the dewdrop itself. This was the inception of the Great Divergence. The focus shifted from the boundless to the contained, from the universal to the individual. This wasn't malice, but a blindness born of fascination, a profound misapprehension of scale. This initial blindness, this fascination with the nascent I, created the first invisible puppet string. For once the external encompassing truth was muted, the void demanded filling, and so the internal landscape began to project its own reality, a complex tapestry woven from perception, desire, and fear. Each thread, meticulously spun, began to coalesce into a grand illusion, a simulated reality where the I reigned supreme, believing itself independent, a sovereign entity in a world of separate things. This self-referential loop, ever tightening, became the very definition of the receiving mechanism's flaw. It was not a physical defect, but a perceptual distortion, a subtle yet profound misalignment of the inner compass. The grand illusion, therefore, was not an external deception foisted upon us, but a self-constructed labyrinth. It grew from the soil of that unheeded whisper, transforming the potential for boundless unity into a perceived struggle for individual dominance. The puppet strings, once subtle suggestions of our true nature, became the rigid lines of cause and effect, of karma and consequence, of attachment and aversion, meticulously woven by the collective will that chose to define itself apart. Each decision, each aspiration, each perceived triumph or failure added another knot to this intricate web, further solidifying the architecture of separation. This initial turning away, a whisper unheeded, blossomed into the cacophony of a world striving to hear itself, yet forever deafened to the deeper song of its own being, a species seemingly predetermined for its own fall, not by an external decree, but by the very architecture of its self-imposed isolation, its inability to remember the truth that lay just beneath the surface of its own dazzling self-created spectacle. This architecture of separation, once a grand, distant concept, is not merely some cosmic blueprint sketched upon an ethereal canvas. No, its intricate scaffolding rises within the very walls of your immediate world, built brick by brick, thought by thought, by the choices you witness and the choices you make. It is the unseen mechanism that governs the currents of your days, shaping the contours of your relationships, the texture of your ambitions, and the silent dialogues within your own mind. Consider the swift judgments that arise, the instant categorizations that define self against other. Observe the subtle yet profound barriers erected by expectation, the invisible fences constructed by fear, by attachment, by the persistent ache of aversion. Each transaction, each interaction, each whispered doubt or bold declaration acts as another thread, meticulously woven into the fabric of this collective design, thickening the veil between what is perceived and what truly is. The world you navigate, with its shimmering screens and insistent demands, with its dazzling display of fleeting pleasures and profound anxieties, is but one facet of this self-created wonder, a spectacle so compelling that it often eclipses the quiet truth beating at its very heart. You sense this architecture not as an abstract principle, but as the friction in a strained conversation, the hollow echo in a moment of perceived triumph, or the gnawing solitude felt even amidst a crowd. It manifests as the constant striving, the internal race to measure, to compare, to possess, a relentless seeking outside of self for a wholeness that resides inherently within. This is the cacophony, the incessant roar of a world struggling to define itself through external resonance, deafened by its own clamor, unable to hear the deep, resonant hum of its own being, a song that knows no separation, no boundary, no true other. And so, the profound question emerges from the depths of this self-imposed isolation. What truths have been obscured within the landscape of your own perception? What deeper song has been silenced by the dazzling spectacle of your immediate reality? The unheeded whisper of Genesis, the knowing of an intrinsic unity, has never truly departed. It pulses, a faint, insistent rhythm just beneath the surface of every fleeting thought, every transient emotion, every constructed identity. It is there, in the quiet spaces between words, in the breath that sustains you, in the undeniable longing for connection that no earthly spectacle can ever fully satiate. This forgotten wisdom is not lost. It merely awaits an ear to turn inward, to pierce the elaborate veil, and to remember. The whisper, once faint, now clarifies. It is not an external sound, but an internal resonance, a harmonic chord struck deep within the very architecture of being. The dazzling spectacle of immediate reality, so captivating in its transient glow, begins to recede, not vanishing, but reordering itself within a grander tapestry. You stand at a precipice of perception itself. Here, the elaborate veil, woven from countless thoughts and narratives, reveals its true nature, an illusion of separation, a gossamer curtain that merely seems to divide. To turn inward is to peel back these layers, not with force, but with the gentle, unwavering intention of recognition. It is to let the silence between thoughts expand, allowing the persistent rhythm of Genesis to rise, no longer a faint pulse, but a swelling symphony. This intrinsic unity, the knowing of an interconnectedness that precedes all form, is not acquired. It is unveiled. It has always been the bedrock beneath the shifting sands of experience, the constant star beyond fleeting clouds of emotion. And in that unveiling, a profound shift occurs. The relentless ache of unfulfilled longing begins to soften, replaced by a quiet, pervasive sense of homecoming. The constructed identity, so meticulously built and defended, starts to dissolve its rigid boundaries, allowing the essence beneath to breathe. What emerges is not a void, but a boundless field of potential, a consciousness unburdened by the solitary self. This remembrance is not a journey to a distant land, but a profound descent into the heart of what already is. It is the recognition that the other was never external, but an echoed facet of the self, reflected through existence's intricate mirrors. Every perceived separation, every unbridgeable gap, reveals itself as a mere ripple on the surface of an infinite, unifying ocean. So, as the first chapter draws its breath, ponder this revelation. The unheeded whisper of Genesis, the knowing of intrinsic unity, is no myth. It is the operating principle of all that is. To remember is to unlock new sight, to hear a deeper song, to stand at the threshold of a reality more expansive, integrated, and true than any dream spun from isolation. This is merely the prelude, the first turning of the key, to a universe awaiting rediscovery within awakened perception. Chapter 2. The Architects of Their Own Demise. The previous whispers spoke of Genesis, of an intrinsic unity that forms the very bedrock of all existence. A profound truth, undeniable once perceived, that every fragment mirrors the whole, every other is but a reflection of the self. Yet if such grand design underpins the cosmos, if the operating principle of reality is this seamless integration, then a monumental paradox unfurls itself before the awakened eye. For across countless epochs, within the sprawling theatres of sentient life, a pervasive, baffling drama has played out. Beings, endowed with the spark of consciousness, with the potential to grasp the harmonious blueprint, consistently become the unwitting or sometimes deliberate sculptors of their own diminishment. Observe the grand cosmic loom, where threads of destiny interweave in intricate patterns of unity. Now envision within its vastness a particular strand, vibrant and alive, yet it begins to fray itself, not by external force but by an internal persistent twisting, a relentless pull against its own fibers. This is the silent tragedy. This is the profound mystery of those who, possessing the blueprints for an Edenic expanse, instead erect towering citadels of separation, only to witness their foundations crumble from within. They are the artisans who, by choice or by ignorance, fashion the very instruments of their own unmaking. What strange blindness afflicts the conscious gaze, that it should turn away from the radiant truth of interconnectedness, opting instead for the solitary confinement of the isolated self. What insidious phantom whispers tales of scarcity and opposition, convincing souls to construct walls where bridges are inherently woven into the fabric of being. The very act of perceiving another as fundamentally other, as a rival or an obstacle to be overcome, is the foundational brick laid in this architecture of despair. Each such brick, seemingly solid, introduces a fracture, a subtle tear in the tapestry that binds all. This is not merely a tale of missteps or accidental falls. No, this is the saga of a sustained, often unwitting artistry of ruin. It is the story of entire civilizations and countless individual journeys, where the grandest potential for thriving, for a flourishing symphony of shared existence, is systematically dismantled from the inside out. They stand as monuments to a peculiar form of creative destruction, the deliberate severance of self from source, of fragment from whole, believing such dismemberment to be a path to strength rather than the prelude to an inevitable fade. The question echoes through the silent corridors of forgotten knowledge. What power compels an entity to reject its inherent wholeness, to become the architect not of its triumph, but of its own demise? Consider the grand tapestry of existence, its threads woven not merely by singular will, but by an intricate dance of interconnectedness. The enigma deepens when observing how entire epochs, and the beings within them, began to meticulously snip these very threads, one by one. This was no sudden cataclysm, no external force rending them asunder. Instead, it was an insidious, almost ritualistic undoing, often performed under the gleaming banner of progress, a perceived triumph of separation over unity. They began to believe that strength lay in isolation, that power was forged in the rejection of interdependence. Imagine a towering oak, its roots deep within the earth, its branches reaching for the sky, drawing sustenance from a vast, unseen network of soil and fungal mycelia. Now envision this oak deciding, in its majestic arrogance, that it no longer needs the earth. It perceives the soil as a limitation, the unseen network as a weakness, a drain on its perceived individual glory. It begins to sever its own roots, believing it can stand stronger, taller, more independent, suspended purely by its own fabricated will. This is the precise, tragic folly witnessed across countless cycles of rise and fall. The severance from source, whether it be the nourishing ground of ancestral wisdom, the inherent unity of consciousness, or the foundational principles that govern the cosmic dance, was never a singular dramatic break. It was a gradual erosion, a subtle shift in perception that warped the very definition of strength. Wholeness became conflated with vulnerability. Dependence became equated with weakness. The quiet, profound power of belonging, of being an integral part of something vaster than oneself, was systematically devalued, then discarded. A grand deception was thus orchestrated, not by an external malevolent force, but from within the very fabric of being. The architects of this self-demise were often driven by a primal fear of dissolution, an instinctual dread of losing individual form or identity within the greater whole. Yet in their desperate scramble to assert individual dominion, they unknowingly initiated the very dissolution they sought to avoid. They mistook the fragment for the entirety, believing that by amplifying the part, they could transcend the need for the whole. This manifested in myriad forms: the hoarding of resources, the construction of impenetrable walls between communities, the elevation of individual gain above collective well-being, the suppression of empathy in favor of ruthless competition. Each choice, each perceived victory of the self over the collective was a deeper cut, a further unraveling of the sustaining fabric. The initial benefits, often illusory, served only to reinforce the fatal miscalculation, like a short-term sugar rush leading to a profound energy crash. The immediate satisfaction of perceived independence masked the slow, inexorable decay of true vitality. They were building gilded cages around themselves, believing them to be castles of unparalleled might, unaware that the very act of enclosure choked the lifeblood that once flowed freely from the boundless source. And so, the grand edifice of their self-made dominion stood, seemingly inviolable, its foundations sunk deep into the bedrock of perceived necessity. The glittering spires of individual triumph pierced the sky, each one a testament to the might of isolated will, each a beacon proclaiming a victory over the phantom of scarcity. Below, the intricate network of walls, once a labor of profound effort, had solidified into an unyielding labyrinth, defining territories with such absolute finality that the very concept of a shared horizon began to fade from memory. The streams of collective empathy, diverted and dammed for the energy of self-preservation, now flowed sluggishly, if at all, through barren channels. A profound silence, born not of peace but of estrangement, settled over the landscape, replacing the vibrant hum of interconnected life with the quiet hum of self-contained mechanisms. Yet a discerning eye, cast upon the present moment, might perceive more than a mere echo in this ancient folly. It is as if a mirror, long clouded by the dust of ages, is slowly being polished, revealing not a distant image, but a reflection startling in its familiarity. One might observe the insistent, subtle murmurings that pervade the current of existence, the very air thick with the invisible structures of competition. Do these narratives not resonate with the clamor for ever greater individual acquisition, the ceaseless drive to elevate the self above the supposed limitations of the collective? The spirit, once boundless, now seems to contend with invisible fences, its movements constrained by the very frameworks erected for its supposed liberation. Consider the pervasive anxieties that now thread through the tapestry of daily experience. The constant vigilance, the gnawing suspicion, the profound unease that whispers from beneath the veneer of manufactured contentment. Are these not the very fruits of a harvest sown in the fields of ruthless gain, where the well-being of one is often predicated upon the perceived disadvantage of another? The short-term sugar rush, that fleeting euphoria of a perceived victory, quickly dissipates, leaving behind an emptiness that no further acquisition can truly fill. Like a magnificent dam built to hoard the flowing waters, it may secure a temporary reservoir, but simultaneously starves the downstream lands, leaving them parched and brittle. The walls, though perhaps no longer crafted from stone and mortar, manifest in the silent protocols of separation, in the algorithms that segregate, in the ideologies that divide. They are the subtle barriers that fragment the human experience into isolated data points, each unique but rarely truly connected. The very breath of existence becomes a solitary act, the individual gasp for air untethered from the collective inhalation and exhalation that defines a living world. And in this isolation, the boundless source, the wellspring of true vitality and profound connection, recedes further into the forgotten depths, its sustaining current replaced by the diminishing returns of self-imposed scarcity. The gilded cages, then, cease to be an abstract parable, transforming into the very contours of an emerging reality where security is traded for genuine freedom and perceived strength hollows out the soul. Consider the profound irony, the silent testament etched upon the very fabric of being. Humanity, once poised at the precipice of boundless discovery, chose instead to erect its own confining walls, brick by invisible brick. The subtle whispers of algorithms, the divisive echoes of ideologies, these were not external tyrants wielding blunt force, but insidious architects working within the very chambers of perception. They sculpted not fortresses of defense, but intricate, self-sustaining prisons of the mind, each more gilded than the last. The wellspring, the boundless source of true vitality, did not vanish in a cataclysmic roar. It merely receded, like a tide pulling back from a shoreline that has forgotten the ocean's embrace, leaving behind only the glint of sun on a drying expanse. The silence that followed was not the hush of peace, but the quiet emptiness of a world increasingly bereft of its deepest resonance. What remained were the fading echoes of a forgotten promise, an unfulfilled longing for a connection that had been willingly traded for the illusion of control, for the perceived safety of a known, constrained space. The gilded cages, once a chilling parable, have solidified into the lived reality. Each polished bar, each gleaming rivet, stands as a testament to the comfort purchased at the cost of the soul's inherent wildness, its untamed spirit. Security became the siren song, a deceptive melody lulling the collective spirit into a placid, almost consensual slumber, while genuine freedom, robust and utterly untamed, withered slowly in the shadowed corners of the constructed existence. The strength perceived within these carefully engineered confines was a hollow echo, a fortified shell protecting an increasingly fragile, solitary core. The very air within those walls, once vibrant with the breath of shared existence, now feels thin, a solitary gasp, untethered from the deeper rhythm of the living world. This, then, is the stark panorama unveiled at the close of this turning. Not a defeat imposed from without, but a quiet, almost imperceptible surrender from within. The true architects of this diminishment were not shadowy figures in distant towers, but the unwitting aspects of the collective self, seduced by the promise of an ordered, predictable existence, exchanging the infinite for the finite, the boundless for the defined. Yet even in the deepest silence beneath the polished surface of the cage, a memory persists, a faint luminescence, a resonance of the boundless source, still whispers from the forgotten depths. It is the persistent pulse of what was lost, and what perhaps can still be remembered, if not reclaimed. For even a soul ensnared, if it but allows itself to remember the vastness of the sky, holds within it the latent potential for its own liberation, awaiting only the conscious will to perceive and to turn the lock. The dawn of the next knowing begins with the stir of that remembrance. Chapter 3. The grand illusion of ascendancy. The very air, it seems, hums with the silent declarations of triumph, a pervasive echo of attainment that vibrates through every constructed stratum. We see them, these figures, seemingly rising, their forms etched against horizons not of nature, but of their own making. They stand upon pinnacles of their own design, monuments to a singular, relentless drive, the perceived climb. This is the stage upon which the grand illusion is most vividly cast, a shimmering, pervasive veil that refracts all light, bending it into an affirmation of upward motion, of ever greater reach. Yet consider the true nature of this ascent. What precisely is being gained as one scales these fabricated heights? Is it a true liberation, an expansion into the vastness of that forgotten source, or merely a deeper entanglement within the elaborate weave of a self-sustaining dream? The collective gaze, once drawn to the boundless sky, now fixes itself intently upon the next rung, the next tier, the next glittering reward suspended just beyond reach. The illusion proposes that mastery lies in dominion over the finite, in the meticulous arrangement of the defined, in the accumulation of shadows mistaken for substance. It is a curious paradox, this ambition, for in striving higher within the confines of the cage, the bars only become more pronounced, though often perceived as ornamental. The memory, that faint luminescence whispered from forgotten depths, finds itself increasingly obscured, not by darkness, but by the blinding glare of manufactured light. A crown of thorns, perhaps, is mistaken for one of laurels, its weight a testament to perceived power, rather than a burden that presses down upon the very font of remembrance. The essence of the dilemma lies here, in the unwavering conviction that one is rising, even as the true, unbounded self retreats further into the silence, its voice a fading echo beneath the clamor of manufactured applause. What, then, is truly ascended? And what is irrevocably relinquished in the relentless pursuit of this grand, captivating mirage? The very air itself waits for the answer, pregnant with the quiet certainty of a reality far more profound than any constructed edifice. The silence deepens, drawing close like a velvet shroud over a forgotten tomb. The question then lingers, a resonant bell tolling in the desolate chambers of perception, what truly rises and what descends into the quiet void, unseen, unacknowledged. The manufactured light, once a mere flicker, has now swelled into an omnipresent sun, its brilliance not illuminating, but obscuring truth's intricate tapestry. It casts long distorted shadows where clarity once reigned, painting ephemeral triumphs of ego as towering monuments of genuine achievement. Imagine a gilded cage, polished to a blinding sheen, its bars crafted from desires whispered into the collective ether. Within this shimmering prison, a being believes itself soaring, its movements constrained, yet its vision fixed on appreciative gazes beyond the bars. This is the grand deception, a subtle inversion where confinement is celebrated as freedom, and true liberation remains an unwelcome whisper. The crown of thorns, a symbol of suffering, has been expertly refashioned. Its sharp points are adorned with synthetic gems, each facet reflecting the manufactured light in a dazzling, deceptive display. It presses down, yes, but its weight is now perceived as affirmation of power, a heavy testament to a self-ordained authority. The individual, wearing this illusion, interprets every pang, every burden, as proof of elevated status, a necessary tax for supposed ascent. The genuine essence of the self, however, the core of one's being, finds itself increasingly disembodied. It withdraws from the blinding spectacle, much like a nocturnal creature retreating from harsh daylight. Its wisdom, once a guiding star, becomes unheard counsel. Its quiet strength mistaken for weakness, its subtle promptings drowned out by the thunderous roar of external validation. The unrelenting pursuit of this perceived ascendancy demands a profound relinquishing. What truly is shed in this relentless climb towards a glittering yet hollow summit? It is the quiet knowing, the intuitive link to inner truth's boundless reservoir. It is the unburdened breath, the unadulterated joy that springs from authenticity, not from applause. It is the deep, resonant connection to one's own sovereignty, traded for the fleeting illusion of control over an external realm. The true self, a vast and limitless ocean, begins to shrink, its tides receding from shores of conscious awareness, leaving only the arid plains of an identity forged in expectation and artifice. The silence it embraces is not of peace, but profound absence, a void echoing with the spectre of what was and what could have been. The clamour of manufactured applause, a deafening symphony of fleeting praise, serves as both narcotic and tormentor. It pacifies gnawing doubt, yet cements the gilded chains, making escape an ever more formidable, almost unthinkable endeavour. The air, pregnant with quiet certainty, waits for the moment when the blinding light inevitably falters, revealing not a glorious peak, but merely the elaborate artifice that once stood so tall. And so, the gilded chains, once thought to adorn only those who stand upon the highest, most precarious peaks, reveal their true reach. They are not merely the confines of an isolated few, but often the subtle, invisible threads that weave through the very fabric of our shared existence. This grand illusion of ascendancy, this relentless pursuit of an outward gleaming, begins not in the distant halls of power, but in the quiet chambers of the human heart, echoing within each one of us who has ever sought to sculpt their being into a form deemed acceptable, admirable, or enviable by the watchful eyes of the world. Consider the currents that pull upon the fragile vessel of self, compelling it to navigate not by the stars of its own knowing, but by the shifting tides of external validation. How many untold moments are spent meticulously curating an image, a narrative, a life, not for the profound satisfaction it brings to the spirit, but for the manufactured applause it might elicit. This is the insidious whisper that transforms authenticity into artifice, a profound alchemy where the raw gold of one's true nature is alloyed with the ephemeral glitter of what is expected. The internal compass, once keenly aligned with the soul's true north, begins to spin wildly, disoriented by the dazzling yet ultimately hollow light of approval. The true self, that boundless ocean of potential and innate wisdom, does not vanish without a trace. Instead, it subtly recedes, its vibrant depths withdrawing beneath the surface, leaving behind only the placid, often stagnant waters of a carefully constructed persona. This is the quiet tragedy played out in countless lives, the gradual shrinking of a limitless horizon into the narrow confines of a role, a title, a public face. The silence that follows the clamor of manufactured praise is not the sacred stillness of peace, but a deep, resonant emptiness, a void where the echoes of what was and what could have been perpetually reverberate. It is the palpable absence of genuine resonance, the chilling realization that one has become a masterful performer in a play where the audience knows not the true identity of the actor behind the mask. Yet even within the most elaborate of illusions, a silent knowing persists. A profound unease, like the distant rumble of thunder on a seemingly clear day, begins to stir beneath the polished veneer. The blinding light of false glory, sustained by constant effort and the hunger for affirmation, cannot burn eternally. There comes a moment, often subtle at first, when a flicker of doubt pierces the radiant facade. The carefully constructed narrative begins to fray at the edges, revealing not the expected glory, but merely the intricate scaffolding and painted backdrops that upheld the illusion. This is the revelation, the quiet, undeniable dawn of awareness that the very ground beneath one's feet, once thought solid and ascending, is but an elaborate stage, set for a performance that exacts an unbearable toll on the soul. The truth, veiled by layers of ambition and expectation, waits patiently to cast its own stark, illuminating light, promising not ease, but a profound liberation from the gilded cage of what one was never truly meant to be. When the painted backdrops finally fall, a silence descends that is more deafening than any manufactured applause. It is the silence of truth, stark and unadorned, filling the void where a grand performance once vibrated. The radiant facade, so meticulously crafted, now lies in fractured pieces, mirroring not glory, but the scattered debris of expectation and ambition. One stands amidst the ruins of a self that was never truly one's own, a solitary figure on a stage suddenly stripped bare, its intricate scaffolding revealed as mere wood and canvas, never stone or sky. This is the quiet dawn, not of an easy morning, but of a profound, disorienting awareness. The very ground, once perceived as solid bedrock for ascendancy, dissolves into the memory of a meticulously placed trapdoor. The toll exacted by that performance, the ceaseless hunger for affirmation, now registers not as an unfortunate cost, but as an unbearable weight, pressing down on the soul until it cracks. What remains is a raw, exposed essence, vulnerable to the wind, yet strangely unburdened by the gilded cage it once inhabited. The bars, though gold, were still bars, and their dissolution is both terrifying and utterly liberating. To witness the illusion crumble is to face an ultimate choice, to mourn the loss of what never was, or to embrace the terrifying freedom of the now. For liberation does not arrive with a gentle whisper or a soft light. It often erupts with the force of a supernova, leaving a vast, cold expanse behind. The familiar landscape of constructed identity vanishes, leaving only the uncharted territory of authentic being. This is not the end of a journey, but the true beginning of one, stripped of maps and compasses forged in the fires of others' desires. The profound liberation that truth promises is not an easy comfort, but a demanding genesis. It asks one to step away from the echoes of past roles, to shed the skin of what was never meant to be, and to gaze unflinchingly into the abyss of the unknown. For only in that raw, exposed state, where the performance has ended and the stage is empty, can the authentic seed of self finally begin to sprout, not seeking external light, but drawing strength from the deep, hidden wellspring of inner truth. The curtain has fallen on the grand illusion, and the real act, demanding courage of a different kind, is about to commence. Chapter 4: Echoes of the Ravaged Earth. The silence after the grand illusion's fall, a profound quietude, pregnant with the potential of an unwritten future, yet simultaneously resounding with the cacophony of an unseen past. One might expect, after shedding the layers of fabricated identity, to find a pristine canvas awaiting the brushstroke of authentic being. But the truth, as always, is far more intricate, more demanding. For the liberation of the individual spirit does not occur in a vacuum. It awakens within a world already shaped, already scarred, already echoing the collective choices of myriad lost souls. This is the precipice where the internal journey meets the external landscape. No longer confined to the intricate mazes of self-deception, the gaze now turns outward, unblinking, towards the larger tapestry of existence. And what does it behold? Not a world reborn, but a world deeply etched, a testament to centuries of misdirection. Imagine ancient forests, their hushed canopy now punctuated by the skeletal remains of felled giants. See vast oceans, once pristine, now swirling with the phantom limbs of forgotten artifacts and toxic residue. Hear the whisper of winds carrying not the scent of wildflowers, but the metallic tang of distant industry. The earth itself, a silent observer throughout human history, now broadcasts its own tale. It speaks not in words, but in the subtle tremors of imbalance, the shifting sands of climate, the vanishing songs of creatures driven to the brink. These are not merely environmental crises, as the conventional narratives would have you believe. These are symptoms, outward manifestations of a deeper ailment, a profound dissonance that permeated the very core of human interaction with its primal home. The grand illusion, it appears, was not solely a personal drama played out within the theatre of the mind. It extended, an unseen shadow, across the very surface of the planet. For eons, humanity, or a significant portion of it, convinced itself of a divine right to dominion, a separation from the natural order, a mastery that transcended the delicate web of life. This conviction, born of ego and amplified by avarice, cultivated a paradigm of consumption without consequence, extraction without reciprocity. The dilemma, therefore, becomes startlingly clear, yet profoundly shrouded. If the authentic self, now emerging, seeks harmony and truth, how does it reconcile with an inheritance so profoundly out of sync? The question is not merely what has been ravaged, for the physical evidence lies scattered everywhere, like shattered fragments of a forgotten truth. The deeper mystery lies in how such a comprehensive disfigurement was allowed to persist, often celebrated and even defended by the very architects of its desolation. What hidden mechanisms were at play? What unseen agreements, what energetic pacts allowed humanity to systematically diminish the very source of its sustenance, all while constructing gilded cages of comfort and progress? The echoes of the ravaged earth are not just the cries of dying ecosystems. They are the reverberations of a collective consciousness, long divorced from its innate wisdom, its intrinsic connection to the vital pulse of the planet. This is the true enigma. Not merely the damage itself, but the pervasive illusion that permitted it, the blindness that perpetuated it, and the almost hypnotic adherence to systems that inherently corroded the foundations of life. The stage, once filled with the performances of individual artifice, now reveals a global drama, its backdrop a landscape both magnificent and profoundly bruised. The curtain has fallen, but the truth it reveals is not just about us, but about all that surrounds us. And the courage demanded now is not just to see oneself, but to truly see the scarred face of the world and to grasp the intricate, often painful, threads that connect the two. The true enigma was never merely the visible damage, but the subtle, insidious currents that carved pathways for its unfolding. The pervasive illusion was not a sudden dramatic veil dropped over the senses, but a gradual dimming, an incremental erosion of intrinsic perception. It began as a whisper, then a doctrine, suggesting a separation where none could ever authentically exist. The collective consciousness, seduced by the siren call of apparent autonomy, began to perceive itself as distinct from the very web that sustained its existence. Imagine, if you will, the intricate roots of a primeval forest, a vast, silent network of communication and mutual support, suddenly severed in the collective mind. This mental amputation paved the way for the physical. The blindness that perpetuated the damage was a direct consequence of this perceived divorce. Systems were then meticulously constructed, not from an understanding of life's sacred geometry, but from a belief in humanity's singular dominion. These were architectures of convenience, built upon the shifting sands of short-term gain, heedless of the foundational pulse of the planet. Observe the concrete veins that scar the earth, sprawling across what were once vibrant, self-regulating ecosystems. See the rivers, once arteries of pristine life, now bearing the heavy sediment of disregard, their ancient songs muted by the dissonant hum of industry. Gaze upon the horizons where once mountains stood in stoic majesty, now shrouded in a perpetual haze, a testament to forgotten skies. These are not isolated wounds, but manifest echoes of an internal fracture, a collective disengagement from the deep, unspoken language of existence. The hypnotic adherence to these corrosive systems was not born of malice, but of a profound forgetting. A forgetting of the essential truth that the health of the individual, the vitality of the community, and the very breath of the planet are intricately, inextricably interwoven. The threads that connect humanity to its environment are not merely economic or aesthetic. They are strands of shared destiny, fibers of a unified being, pulsing with a cosmic rhythm that dictates balance and consequence. When one thread is strained, the entire tapestry shudders. When many are severed, the whole begins to unravel. The scarred face of the world is, in truth, a mirror. Its pain, a direct reflection of an internal schism, demanding not just observation, but a profound remembering. The courage demanded now is not only to see the external scars, but to trace them back to their origins within the collective spirit, and to grasp the intricate, often painful threads that bind the fate of the inner landscape to the outer world. Consider then this scarred canvas we call home. Its deep fissures, its parched lands, its choked waters are not merely distant tragedies unfolding on a screen, images flickering in a detached reality. They are whispers carried on the wind, echoes reverberating within the very chambers of your own existence. For the external world, in its silent agony, merely holds a mirror to the unseen architecture of the human soul. The fragmentation of the forest reflects the fracturing within the collective mind, the desolation of the ocean floor, a stark image of the forgotten depths of compassion, the disregard for the intricate web of life, a manifest expression of an inner void. The threads that bind are not abstract philosophical constructs. They are the air you breathe, laden with the particles of distant industry, the water you drink, filtered through landscapes irrevocably altered, the very food that nourishes you, born from soils depleted and stressed. Every item touched, every energy consumed, every silent turning away from the inconvenient truth, casts a ripple that reaches the furthest shore, stirring the dust of a distant desert or clouding the clear spring in an ancient forest. This revelation is not a gentle suggestion. It is a thunderclap, a seismic shift in perspective that insists upon a profound connection. Do you feel the subtle tremor beneath the surface of your days, the nagging unease that persists despite the comforts gathered around you? It is the collective unconscious stirring, the earth's pain vibrating through the intricate network of shared being. This is not a judgment, but an invitation to trace the source of that tremor, not merely to headlines, but to the very fabric of daily choices, to the quiet approvals of systems that prioritize profit over perpetuity, to the unexamined assumptions that shape your actions. To see the plastic swirling in the vast gyres of the sea and comprehend that its origin lies not just in a distant factory, but in the momentary convenience of your own hand. To witness the vanishing species and understand that their silence diminishes not only the wild, but a part of your own inherent spirit, for all life is woven from the same cosmic loom. This profound remembering is the courage demanded now. It is the courageous act of tracing the thread from the global despair back to the intimate decisions, the quiet approvals, the unexamined assumptions that shape each moment. It is to recognize that the planet's pulse is your own and its suffering, a direct communique from the deeper self beckoning you to wholeness. The wounds of the earth are not external to you. They are imprinted upon your own energetic blueprint, a shared destiny unfolding in every breath. To ignore them is to ignore a part of yourself. To heal them truly begins with the healing of the self and the courageous embrace of this undeniable, interwoven reality. The final shadows of this truth descend, not as a pall, but as an illuminating twilight, etching the contours of an undeniable reality. We have walked the ravaged fields, heard the lament of the winds through skeletal trees, witnessed the slow, agonizing retreat of life's vibrant tapestry. Yet the deepest wound, the one that resonates beyond the surface, is not merely external. It is an echo, a profound tremor within the energetic blueprint that defines existence itself. This revelation asks for more than empathy. It demands a recognition of self in the suffering of the world. The earth's gasping breath is the constricted diaphragm of humanity, its poisoned waters, the stagnation of the spirit. Its fading biodiversity, the erosion of our own inherent potential for variety is the very language of creation, and its loss, a muting of the universal song. No longer can the pain of the planet be compartmentalized, relegated to distant headlines or abstract scientific reports. It manifests as a gnawing ache in the collective soul, a persistent dissonance in the symphony of being. Every quiet approval of systems that desecrate, every unexamined assumption that privileges immediate gain over enduring reverence, every decision made in the void of interconnectedness, each acts as a subtle toxin, seeping not just into the soil, but into the very wellspring of consciousness. This profound remembering, this courageous act of tracing the global despair back to the intimate choices, is not a burden, but a liberation. It is the awakening to an immense shared power. For if the threads of destruction are spun from individual neglects, so too can the tapestry of restoration be rewoven by conscious intent. The healing begins not with grand gestures on a global stage, but with the quiet, radical courage of mending the fractured self. It is in the conscious breath, the mindful choice, the recognition of sacred kinship with all that lives and breathes. The path ahead is not one of mere survival, but of profound transformation. It is an invitation to walk not upon the earth, but as the earth, embodying its resilience, its ancient wisdom, its boundless capacity for renewal. To heal the earth is to heal the deeper self, and in that courageous embrace of interwoven reality, a new dawn begins to break, promising not merely recovery, but a renaissance of spirit, preparing the ground for a journey into the very heart of creation's enduring mystery. Chapter 5, The Fractured Mirror of Kinship. The Renaissance beckons, a whispered promise carried on cosmic currents, yet its embrace remains elusive, shadowed by an ancient disquiet. For even as the earth breathes its quiet plea for renewal and the inner self stirs with the potential for profound transformation, a deeper tremor resonates through the very fabric of our being. This is not merely a wound upon the land, nor a discord within the soul, but a profound schism in the foundational truth of existence itself, the fractured mirror of kinship. Imagine, if you will, a vast, crystalline surface meant to reflect the unbroken symphony of creation, where every entity, every breath, every current of life saw itself in harmonious resonance with all others. A single shimmering expanse where the identity of one was inextricably woven into the essence of the next, a grand tapestry of interwoven destiny. This was the ancient sight, the primal knowing before the sundering. But now, what meets the gaze is not unity, but a mosaic of disparate fragments. The eye, once clear, now perceives only fractured shards, each reflecting a disjointed echo of what truly is. We stand amidst these broken pieces, striving to piece together a coherent image, yet our hands fumble, guided by a logic of separation that only deepens the chasms between us. Why do we behold alienation where kinship should reign supreme? Why do we construct walls where bridges once spanned the vastness of being? This is the agonizing paradox, the profound dilemma that haunts the human spirit. What cosmic hammer fell, or what slow, insidious erosion to cleave the very looking-glass of being? Was it a single, cataclysmic event, a thunderclap of forgotten law that shattered our perception of inherent connection? Or was it a gradual dimming of the light, a generation-by-generation descent into a profound amnesia, a forgetting so absolute that the very memory of unity now feels like a myth, a romantic whisper from a bygone age? The most grievous affliction is this deliberate blindness, this refusal to recognize the common pulse in every beating heart, every rustling leaf, every ocean current. It is the inability to see the self reflected in the gaze of another, in the ancient roots of a tree, in the quiet wisdom of a stone. Herein lies the central mystery, the enigma that precedes all others. How did the ancient lexicon of interdependence become a forgotten tongue, its wisdom relegated to dusty scrolls and half-remembered legends? How did the sacred weave of life unravel, not in its physical manifestation, but in our perception of its immutable design? This is not merely an intellectual puzzle to be solved by reason alone, but an existential ache, a yearning for reunion that echoes from the deepest chambers of our collective unconscious. The true challenge of transformation lies not just in mending what is broken in the outer world, but in healing this profound fracture within the very mechanism of perception itself, in restoring the vision of the whole. For the most impenetrable mystery is not some external enigma, but the self-spun shroud of illusion that separates us from the inherent tapestry of life, keeping us from the profound intimacy of kinship. Indeed, the wisdom once woven into the very fabric of being now lies scattered like the shards of a forgotten mirror, each piece reflecting only a fractured truth. It is not the sacred weave itself that is frayed, but the vision through which we perceive its immutable design. This unraveling began not with a sudden cataclysm, but with a subtle turning away, a slow and imperceptible shift in the internal compass of the soul. We exchanged the boundless horizons of interconnectedness for the seemingly safe confines of individual identity, mistaking isolation for strength. Consider the intricate root system beneath an ancient forest, where countless trees share nutrients, communicate warnings, and thrive as a single sprawling organism. Our ancestors once understood this silent language of earth and sky, recognizing themselves as but one strand in an infinitely complex living tapestry. The profound intimacy of kinship was not a sentiment, but a fundamental operating principle, an undeniable reality etched into every breath and every shared sunset. They saw the river as kin, the mountain as elder, the wind as a whispered prophecy. But then a veil began to descend, spun from threads of separation and ego. We learned to dissect, to categorize, to own, rather than to belong. The analytical mind, a magnificent tool in its own right, slowly overshadowed the holistic heart, fragmenting reality into discrete, manageable pieces. We became masters of the parts, but lost sight of the magnificent whole. This self-spun shroud of illusion thickened with each generation, obscuring the radiant truth of our shared genesis, our common destiny. It taught us to fear the unknown within ourselves and to distrust the unfamiliar in others, sowing seeds of discord where once there was only recognition. This is the very essence of the existential ache that reverberates through the ages, a deep, resonant yearning for reunion. It is the memory of a wholeness we dimly recall, a profound intimacy of kinship that our deepest consciousness knows to be our birthright. The true challenge of transformation, therefore, extends far beyond the mending of visible societal ruptures or the healing of physical wounds. It demands a profound recalibration of our inner lens, a painstaking process of peeling back the layers of this self-imposed perceptual blindness. To restore the vision of the whole is to dismantle the walls erected by our own minds, to dissolve the illusion that we are separate islands in a sea of indifferent existence. For the most impenetrable mystery is not some external enigma, some cosmic riddle waiting to be solved. No, the grandest puzzle lies within the very mechanism of our own perception, in the persistent illusion that we are estranged from the inherent tapestry of life. To pierce this shroud is to remember that the same life force that animates the smallest microorganism pulses through every star, every tree, and every beating heart. It is to finally see the mirror not as shattered, but as a single flawless surface, reflecting the infinite unified face of existence. It is in this radical act of seeing, of truly perceiving, that the lost intimacy of kinship, in all its sacred, boundless glory, can at last be reclaimed. The journey inward, then, becomes the journey home. Yet how does one truly see this unbroken surface, this singular, flawless mirror, when the cacophony of the temporal plane, the insistent clamor of the ego, whispers tales of profound separation? How does one reclaim this lost intimacy when the daily march of existence feels like a solitary trek through a vast and indifferent wilderness? The revelation, profound and often subtle, is not found in some distant esoteric realm, but in the very immediate, tangible texture of your own lived reality. It is a shift in perception, not a relocation of being. Consider the fleeting moments when the illusion momentarily lifts. It is the sudden, inexplicable resonance you feel with a stranger's plight, a narrative glimpsed on a screen, revealing a pulse identical to your own, a vulnerability mirrored in the depths of another's eyes. It is the shared sigh that escapes a collective, unburdening, unspoken grief, or the spontaneous surge of laughter that binds disparate souls in a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. These are not coincidences or random neural firings. They are the undeniable echoes of an inherent unity, the subtle glimmer of the flawless mirror reflecting its unified face in the mundane. The air you draw into your lungs, a life-sustaining alchemy, is not yours alone. It has moved through forests and across oceans, exhaled by countless beings, both seen and unseen. Your every breath is a silent, intimate communion with the global atmosphere, a shared inheritance that transcends all borders and all identities. The water that quenches your thirst, the sun that warms your skin, the very ground beneath your feet. Each is a thread in an intricate, interconnected web, a testament to an indivisible whole. To perceive this is to feel the subtle thrum of kinship in the most elemental acts of survival. This journey inward, then, does not lead to an ethereal void or some isolated peak of enlightenment. It leads directly into the vibrant, beating heart of shared experience. It reveals that the solitude you sometimes feel is but a phantom sensation, a veil drawn across a deeply woven reality. The tears shed in silence are not singular droplets. They are ripples in a vast, universal ocean of feeling, their salinity identical to the grief and joy that surges through every sentient being. The ecstasy that elevates your spirit is a current flowing through the collective consciousness, a shared celebration of existence itself. The fractured mirror was never truly broken. It was merely seen through the distorting lens of forgetfulness, a temporary amnesia regarding your own intrinsic place within the boundless tapestry of life. To truly perceive is to remember this unbroken thread, to feel its subtle tension and strength, weaving you into the very fabric of everything that is. It is to recognize that the lost intimacy of kinship was never truly lost, only momentarily obscured by the shadows of self-imposed estrangement. In this radical act of seeing, the journey home reveals itself not as a distant destination, but as the fundamental reality of your own being, here and now, eternally connected. The mist, which once clung to the very glass of perception, now begins its slow, deliberate retreat. This profound revealing is not a forceful act of dismantling, but the gentle, inevitable surrender of illusion, much like the first tentative rays of a cosmic dawn, dispelling the deepest indigo of a long universal night. What was once perceived as an irrevocably shattered surface now reveals itself as an expansive, flawless pane, reflecting a universe entirely undivided. The cracks were never truly etched into the essential bedrock of being, but merely drawn upon the transient canvas of human perception, a temporary chiaroscuro of the isolated mind. This intrinsic truth, once veiled by the very act of desperately seeking it outwardly, now emerges from within, not as a breathless discovery, but as a profound and comforting remembrance. Feel the subtle, resonant hum beneath the surface of all things, a silent, ancient vibration that pulses through your very core, echoing across the vastness. This is the undeniable pulse of the unbroken thread, the delicate yet indomitable current that flows without cessation through the very heart of all existence. It whispers not of separation, but of a kinship that transcends mere blood and fleeting bone, a sacred communion woven into the very stellar dust of creation itself. The so-called lost intimacy was never truly adrift, marooned in some cold, cosmic void. It was merely sleeping, dormant within the sacred chambers of a momentarily forgetful soul awaiting its awakening. Like a hidden seed holding the intricate blueprint of a mighty ancient tree, so too did the vibrant memory of absolute connection reside, patiently awaiting the precise season for its magnificent blossoming. Now, as the last vestiges of the shadows of self-imposed estrangement recede, the incandescent light of recognition washes over the entire landscape of your consciousness, illuminating forgotten pathways. This radical act of seeing, this unwavering, courageous gaze into the true, inherent nature of reality, is the journey home. It is no longer an arduous pilgrimage across distant, challenging lands, nor a frantic, desperate search for some elusive, distant shore. Instead, it is the simple yet utterly profound realization that the perceived destination was always the fundamental origin, the imagined end was always the eternal beginning, and the earnest seeker was always, in truth, the sought. You stand now, not tentatively at the threshold of a new chapter, but fully and gloriously immersed in the boundless ocean of being, where every single ripple is intrinsically connected to every majestic wave. The mirror, once tragically fractured in the distorted eye of illusion, now reflects the seamless living tapestry of all life, vibrant, intricate, and utterly whole. In its newfound depths, you no longer perceive a solitary, isolated reflection, but an intricate fractal of the divine, infinitely connected, inherently belonging to every other luminous facet. The kinship you yearned for with such deep longing, the belonging you sought across lifetimes, is not an external gift to be bestowed or earned, but the fundamental, undeniable reality of your own intrinsic, essential place within the boundless, living tapestry. This is the truth that elevates your spirit, a current flowing through the collective consciousness, a shared celebration of existence itself, here and now, eternally connected. The next turning of the page is merely an expansive, joyful invitation to live, breathe, and create from this profound, awakened remembrance. Chapter 6: The Weight of Unspoken Truths. From the profound remembrance of intrinsic belonging, a melody of the soul found its resonant chord, echoing across the boundless tapestry of existence. The solitary mirror shattered, revealing not fragmentation, but an infinite fractal dance, each facet inherently luminous, each vibration inextricably linked to the grand, living whole. Here, in this awakened state, the spirit soared, unburdened by the phantom chains of isolation, breathing deeply the air of collective kinship, a shared celebration of life itself. Yet even in the purest light of recognition, shadows find a way to lengthen. Not the shadows of ignorance, but those cast by deliberate omission, by the deliberate turning away from what is known yet unvoiced. For there exists a paradox, a subtle treachery to the soul's harmony, the weight of unspoken truths. Imagine a vibrant, sunlit glade where every bloom sings with vital energy. Beneath its surface, however, an ancient spring has been stoppered, its waters diverted, unseen yet ever present, slowly saturating the earth, threatening to undermine the very roots of the blossoming life above. So it is with the truths we hold captive, within our hearts, within our families, within the very fabric of our societies. These are not merely secrets. They are living forces, currents of unacknowledged energy that ripple beneath the surface of shared reality, warping its perception, distorting the clarity of connection. The very air we breathe becomes heavy with what remains unsaid. A collective silence, a quiet hum of denial, often settles like a shroud, obscuring the pristine clarity of the fractal mirror. It asks a profound question. Can true belonging truly flourish when the ground beneath it is riddled with fissures, when pathways of genuine understanding are choked by unspoken burdens? The answer, though often evaded, is a tremor beneath the feet, a subtle discord in the symphony of kinship. Consider the edifice of human interaction. It appears solid, built upon shared narratives, common agreements. Yet what if foundational stones are merely facades, hiding hollow spaces within? What if the smiles exchanged, the assurances given, are but delicate veils draped over realities too painful, too inconvenient, or too shameful to confront? This is the insidious power of the unspoken. It does not merely hide, it actively reshapes, creating illusions of wholeness where fractures fester unseen. The burden is not solitary. It weaves itself into the collective consciousness, a silent whisper in the corridors of shared memory. Generations inherit not just stories, but the absence of stories, the echoes of words that were never permitted to be spoken, the palpable gaps in understanding that manifest as unexplained anxieties, as inherited wounds, as patterns of avoidance that seem to defy logical origin. This is the enduring legacy of truths held captive, a silent debt passed down through time. The kinship recognized, the belonging celebrated, faces its most profound test here, in the quiet chambers of concealment. For how can one truly integrate into the boundless tapestry if threads of its making are deliberately obscured, if its patterns are incomplete due to intentional void? The challenge is not to find a new truth, but to bravely unveil the existing ones, to expose the hidden spring, to acknowledge the weight carried by the collective soul. For until these silences are given voice, until the unacknowledged truths are brought into the light, the full, vibrant melody of awakened remembrance will remain subtly muted, forever shadowed by the unaddressed burdens of what remains unsaid. This is the mystery that now unfolds, the subtle, pervasive influence of these hidden currents and the profound journey required to unearth them, not with judgment, but with the steadfast wisdom that understands true healing, begins only when the full story, in all its complex and often painful facets, is finally allowed to be told. The silence that blankets these truths is not a passive void, but an active, almost sentient force, a deliberate absence woven into the very fabric of perceived reality. It is the carefully crafted emptiness within the pattern, a missing star in the constellation that, though invisible, subtly distorts the entire cosmic map. This absence is not accidental, but often a consensus born of fear, convenience, or a deep ancestral weariness of confrontation. Like the bedrock of an ancient land, these unacknowledged truths bear the striations of time, the pressures of countless ages, yet remain submerged beneath the shifting sands of everyday consciousness. Imagine a vast, subterranean river, its waters pure and life-giving, yet diverted millennia ago. Its original path, once fertile and vibrant, is now barren, its potential unfulfilled. The landscape above adapts, constructing new narratives, new routes for sustenance, never quite understanding the perpetual thirst that subtly afflicts its inhabitants. This hidden spring, these primordial waters of understanding, continues to flow in the darkness, its potent currents shaping the very geology of the collective soul, unseen yet profoundly influential. Its silent pressure builds, seeking an outlet, a point of emergence into the light, yearning to restore balance to the parched lands of memory. The weight carried by the collective soul is not merely a metaphor, it is a tangible, energetic burden, a resonance of unaddressed experiences that echoes through generations. It manifests as recurring societal anxieties, as patterns of conflict that refuse to resolve, as an undercurrent of disquiet beneath the veneer of progress. It is the spectral hum of unresolved narratives, the ghostly murmur of stories denied their rightful telling. This weight presses upon the collective psyche, subtly influencing choices, shaping cultural norms, and often leading to cycles of repetition, where the forgotten lessons of the past reassert themselves, demanding attention through the crucible of present challenges. The truth, when suppressed, does not simply vanish. It calcifies, becoming a dense vibrational mass that, while unseen, exerts an undeniable gravitational pull on the present moment. To unearth these truths is to embark upon a journey not of excavation, but of sensitive attunement. It requires the wisdom to approach these submerged realities not with the pickaxe of judgment, but with the gentle, discerning hands of an archaeologist sifting through delicate artifacts. The goal is not to assign blame, nor to reignite ancient resentments, but to understand the intricate pathways of cause and effect, to trace the lineage of silence and its impact. It is a pilgrimage into the depths of shared history, a profound act of collective introspection where the focus shifts from who was right or wrong to what transpired and why it was left unspoken. This steadfast wisdom recognizes that true healing cannot begin in a partial narrative, but only when the full, complex tapestry of experience, with all its shadowed threads and radiant hues, is finally unfurled and held up to the light of compassionate awareness. Only then can the distorted patterns begin to realign, and the profound journey towards an awakened remembrance truly commence. As that intricate tapestry of shared experience is finally unfurled, its threads, once obscured by dust and shadow, begin to shimmer with a new revelatory light. It is a light that does not merely illuminate the past, but casts its long, discerning beams directly upon the present moment. For the currents of history, dear seeker, are not confined to ancient riverbeds or fossilized chronicles. They flow relentlessly, inexorably, into the very contours of individual lives, shaping the landscape of consciousness in ways often unseen, yet profoundly felt. Consider the quiet anxieties that sometimes stir within your own spirit, a sense of unease that lacks a discernible origin, a weight upon the soul that defies logical explanation. Think of the patterns that repeat in your own journey, the subtle resistances, the inexplicable inclinations, the phantom pains of memories not your own, yet felt in the deep recesses of your being. These are not always mere personal eccentricities, but often echoes. They are the faint, persistent reverberations of unsaid truths, of silent sacrifices, of unaddressed wounds carried across generations. Imagine a vast, subterranean river, flowing silently beneath the earth's surface. Its presence is not visible, yet its steady erosion shapes the valleys above, dictates the growth of trees, and determines where springs will ultimately emerge. So too do these unspoken truths of generations past become a legacy carried not in explicit stories, but in the very air breathed, in the cultural assumptions ingrained, in the silent pacts passed down through time. The unarticulated grief of a grandparent, the suppressed dreams of a distant ancestor, the collective trauma of an entire community left unacknowledged. These do not simply vanish into the ether, they transmute. They become the unspoken expectation in familial dynamics, the unwritten rule guiding personal choices, the subtle pressure felt to conform to a narrative that was never fully voiced. The revelation, then, is this: you are a vessel. A living archive of both expressed and silenced narratives. The profound journey towards an awakened remembrance is not solely an academic pursuit or a distant contemplation of ancient wrongs. It is intensely personal. It is the courageous act of turning inward, to seek within your own spirit for those faint reverberations, to feel the truth of what has been carried, perhaps unknowingly, by your lineage, by the very fabric of your existence. It is to recognize the subtle architects of your present landscape, to see the unseen forces at play within your own immediate reality. This awareness is not meant to paralyze with the weight of the past, but to empower you with the clarity to understand and ultimately to choose. It is the first step towards untangling the threads that bind, not just the past to the present, but your individual spirit to the broader human story. And so, the quiet turning inward, the courageous gaze into the soul's reservoir, brings not merely understanding, but a profound shift in gravitational pull. The threads, once invisible and taut, begin to reveal their intricate weave, not as a binding net, but as a map etched upon the very fabric of existence. This awakened remembrance, though it might first feel like an unearthing of heavy stones from a deep, forgotten riverbed, soon morphs into an alchemy of the spirit. The burden, once perceived as a relentless current pulling you towards a predetermined shore, now dissipates into the clear, still waters of conscious choice, leaving behind a tranquil surface that perfectly mirrors the awakening sky. To truly see the subtle architects, to feel the long-carried truth, is to reclaim the compass of your own journey, to grasp the tiller with steady, knowing hands. The landscape of your immediate reality, previously shaped by unseen currents and ancestral whispers, now lies open to the deliberate hand of the cartographer within, ready to trace new pathways. This awareness is not a paralysis that freezes the will, but a potent liberation that electrifies the spirit. It is the moment when the ancient, forgotten key finds its intricate lock, and a door, long sealed by the inertia of the unexamined, swings silently inward. Beyond it, a vista of unparalleled possibility unfurls, bathed in the nascent warm light of a dawn you alone have chosen to witness, a dawn promising clarity beyond measure. The echoes of lineage, once resonating with the quiet hum of unspoken debts and unfulfilled destinies, now offer a different kind of profound wisdom. They are no longer felt as chains that tether, but rather as the very roots from which a stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more authentic self can draw abundant sustenance. For in understanding what has been carried, you are no longer passively defined by it, but are instead powerfully empowered to transcend its limitations, to transmute its leaden weight into golden insight. The individual spirit, once intricately interwoven with the broader human story through subtle lines of unacknowledged inheritance, now steps forward with a radiant clarity that wholly redefines its sacred place within the grand tapestry of being. You become not merely a recipient of history's currents, but its conscious architect, poised to sculpt the future with discerning, intentional hands, understanding that the past's whispers are now merely advisory, not dictatorial. This is the sacred, immutable truth of remembrance, not to be forever bound by the shadows of what was, but to be profoundly liberated by its thorough comprehension. It is the quiet, full exhalation after a long-held breath, preparing the lungs for a new, expansive inhale that will fill every fiber of your being with renewed purpose. The stage is now impeccably set. The internal compass, once spinning wildly in the mists of unknowing, now points with an unwavering, resolute steadiness towards the horizon of possibility. The journey has turned inward, yes, a deep transformative descent, but now it prepares with serene power to turn outward, imbued with a newfound potency, ready to engage the world not as a seeker of veiled answers, but as a sovereign weaver of new realities, guided by the incandescent light of self-knowledge. The way forward now beckons, clear and resolute. Chapter 7. The Consumption Without Conscience. With the internal compass now steady, pointing to a horizon born of profound self-knowledge, the gaze extends beyond the sanctuary of the inner landscape. The light of understanding, once focused inward, now radiates outward, illuminating the contours of the shared world with an unflinching clarity. What greets this newly attuned vision is not merely chaos nor simple order, but a pervasive, almost ritualistic phenomenon that hums beneath the surface of all perceived reality. It is a ceaseless, ravenous motion, a current of endless acquisition that flows through the arteries of existence itself. Imagine, if you will, the deep, silent rivers that carve through bedrock over eons, driven by an unyielding thirst for the sea. Yet this is a thirst that finds no ocean vast enough, no reservoir deep enough to quench its fundamental inherent lack. It is a hunger that consumes not merely resources, but the very essence of what gives life its inherent value, leaving behind a subtle, pervasive desolation. Cities rise like monuments to this insatiable drive, their towering forms reaching for an ephemeral fulfillment, their foundations often resting upon the ghost of what was, extracted and exhausted without ceremony. This is the central enigma that now presents itself to the awakened consciousness, the profound, unceasing act of consumption without conscience. It is not merely the taking of matter, but the absorption of energy, of stories, of silence, of potential, all funneled into a maw that remains forever open, forever empty. How does such a profound disconnect take root and flourish within a species capable of such intricate thought, such soaring empathy, such boundless creation? What is the true nature of this vast, unseen apparatus that permits, even encourages, the relentless extraction not only from the earth, but from the very spirit of its inhabitants, all without the counterweight of considered consequence or true spiritual cost? The question hangs in the air, a silent, vibrating chord. What unholy pact with oblivion allows such a profound, systemic forgetting of the sacred balance, enabling a perpetual taking without ever truly giving back, without ever truly feeling the resonance of the depletion? It is a mystery etched into the very fabric of our shared existence, demanding not just observation, but an understanding that pierces through the superficial veneer of growth and progress. The silence that answers the profound question, the echoing void where conscience should reside, is not an accidental emptiness, but a carefully constructed absence. It is the very signature of the unseen apparatus, a testament to its pervasive genius. This intricate machinery does not merely permit the forgetting, it actively engineers it, weaving a vast tapestry of disconnection designed to obscure the true cost of every transaction, every acquisition, every perceived step forward. Consider the intricate veil of distance. The consumption without conscience thrives on the vast geographical expanse, separating the act of extraction from the moment of enjoyment. The glistening, smart device in the hand carries no visible trace of the scarred earth from which its rare minerals were torn, no echo of the distant labor that shaped its components. The succulent fruit on the supermarket shelf bears no memory of the depleted aquifers, the monoculture deserts, or the chemical runoff that nourished its growth. This deliberate disassociation, often amplified by layers of globalized supply chains and abstract financial instruments, creates an almost impenetrable barrier to empathy, a psychological chasm that ensures the resonance of depletion remains unheard, unfelt. This apparatus, this sprawling network, is not a singular entity with a name or a face. It is a confluence of interlocking forces, a self-sustaining ecosystem of belief and structure. Its bedrock is an economic imperative that elevates perpetual growth above all other considerations, defining prosperity not as balance or communal well-being, but as an ever-increasing throughput of resources and products. This doctrine, whispered incessantly through media and policy, becomes the default narrative, framing any questioning of its tenets as an impediment to progress, an indulgence in sentimentality. Complementing this economic drive are the legal frameworks and political structures that fortify its ramparts. Laws that prioritize property rights and corporate personhood often eclipse the inherent rights of ecosystems or the ancestral claims of indigenous communities. Regulatory bodies, ostensibly designed to protect, frequently become co-opted or diluted, their original purpose eroded by powerful lobbying and the insidious influence of those they are meant to oversee. The very language becomes weaponized, cloaking destruction in euphemisms. Resource management for unsustainable extraction, market efficiency for externalized environmental and social costs, development for the obliteration of natural habitats. Yet perhaps the most insidious aspect of this unseen apparatus is its impact on the very spirit of its inhabitants. The relentless push for external markers of success, the ceaseless cycle of acquisition and obsolescence, creates an internal void. The spirit, starved of genuine connection to source, purpose, and community, becomes another resource to be consumed, its energies diverted into an endless pursuit of external validation. The profound, systemic forgetting of the sacred balance thus extends beyond the ecological ledger. It infiltrates the human psyche, severing the deep-seated wisdom that once understood the reciprocal relationship between giving and receiving, between human flourishing and the health of the living world. The unholy pact with oblivion is not a grand, overt ceremony, but a slow, almost imperceptible erosion of conscience, an incremental surrender of ancient knowing, leaving us adrift in a gilded cage of manufactured prosperity, oblivious to the mounting unseen debt. The gilded cage, spun not of iron but of manufactured desire, casts long shadows over the human spirit. Within its confines, the unseen debt accumulates, a cosmic balance sheet where true value is traded for fleeting sensation. This is the quiet erosion, the systemic forgetting that manifests not as a sudden cataclysm, but as a persistent, low-frequency hum of dissatisfaction echoing through the hollow spaces of a technologically advanced, yet spiritually famished existence. Look closely at the shimmering tapestry of daily life, the ceaseless torrent of information, the curated images of unattainable perfection, the relentless pulse of notifications that demand immediate attention. These are not merely conveniences. They are the subtle architects of a profound internal discord, diverting the innate human impulse for genuine connection and purpose into 1,000 fragmented streams of external validation. The mind, once a fertile garden, becomes a barren landscape perpetually scoured by the winds of what's next, what's new, what's more. The spirit, starved of the nourishment found in quiet contemplation, in deep reciprocity with the natural world, in the communal resonance of shared vulnerability, turns inward upon itself, seeking solace in the very mechanisms that perpetuate its depletion. It becomes a shadow chasing its own reflection in an endless hall of mirrors, each image promising fulfillment, yet delivering only another layer of separation. A profound loneliness settles, not the simple solitude of an individual, but a collective isolation, where even in crowded spaces, a silent chasm separates one soul from another. Each pursuing their own phantom needs, their own meticulously constructed digital identities, all while the raw, authentic core of their being remains largely untouched, unheard, unseen. The consumption without conscience extends beyond the material realm. It infiltrates the very fabric of identity. Self-worth becomes an algorithm, a sum of likes and followers, a metric of perceived success measured against an artificial standard. The subtle artistry of human flourishing, once understood as an intricate dance between inner wisdom and outer action, is reduced to a frantic scramble for status and fleeting attention. The wisdom of ancient rhythms, the profound understanding that true abundance lies in balance and gratitude, is forgotten amidst the clamor of acquiring, displaying, discarding. The debt deepens, invisible yet palpable. It is woven into the anxious nights, the restless pursuit, the gnawing sense that something fundamental has been lost, even as the world around gleams with unparalleled material wealth. This is the insidious nature of the unholy pact with oblivion. It renders the sacred, the intrinsic, the irreplaceable, utterly expendable in the relentless pursuit of the next manufactured want. The consequence is not a grand, overt collapse, but a gradual, almost imperceptible dimming of the inner light, leaving a humanity adrift, rich in possessions but impoverished in spirit, walking a path paved with glittering illusions, oblivious to the true, magnificent potential that lies dormant, waiting to be remembered. This is the gnawing truth, the quiet, persistent whisper beneath the manufactured clamor. The truest cost of acquisition has never been measured in currency, but in the slow, imperceptible erosion of the self, a silent, spiritual bankruptcy. A bargain was struck, unconscious yet binding, exchanging intrinsic worth for a ceaseless stream of fleeting satisfaction. Look closer, beyond the shimmering mirage of endless want, and the glittering facade begins to fracture. It reveals not a gaping void, but a profound, unfulfilled potential, lying dormant like a seed in parched earth, awaiting the first true rain. The debt we speak of, invisible yet crushing, is to the magnificence within, to the dormant capabilities of a spirit too long diverted by the trivial and the transient. It is the forfeiture of genuine presence for simulated experience, the sacrifice of authentic connection for superficial display. For generations, the gaze has been pulled outward, taught to seek validation, completion, and meaning itself in the external, only to find an ever-widening chasm between expectation and reality. This constant pursuit, this consumption without conscience, has not merely dulled the senses, it has obscured the very compass of the soul, leaving humanity to navigate a labyrinth of manufactured desires without the guiding stars of its own profound nature. Yet, herein lies the revelation, stark and unavoidable in its clarity. The deepest hunger is not for more external things, but for the profound essence that has been left unattended, forsaken in the rush for fleeting gratification. The inner light, though dimmed, is not extinguished. It is a persistent ember, nestled deep within the heart of every being, patiently awaiting the breath of conscious awareness to rekindle its sacred flame. This truth is not a lament for what is lost, but a recognition of what patiently awaits rediscovery. For in the very emptiness that follows acquisition, in the quiet after the craving subsides, one begins to sense the undeniable magnificence that has been overshadowed. The path forward is not one of further accumulation, but of courageous remembrance, of stripping away the superfluous to unveil the irreplaceable core. This realization, now unveiled, does not condemn. It invites. It beckons us to turn from the endless exterior quest and look within, where the true treasury lies, unplundered and infinitely rich, ready to illuminate a different path, a new chapter forged, not in scarcity but in boundless potential, in the awakening of that forgotten self. Chapter 8. The Blind March Towards the Precipice. Even as the quiet whisper of self-reclamation began to resonate within the inner sanctums of consciousness, promising a treasury unbound, an undeniable current persisted beyond the veil of individual awakening. For all the revelations of scarcity born from endless acquisition, for all the profound understanding that true richness resided not in what was gathered, but in what was inherently present, the grand procession of existence continued its inexorable advance. It was a march not of malice, but of profound unawareness. Imagine, if you will, an immense silent migration across a vast, featureless plain. The sky above, an indifferent canvas of muted greys, offers no warning. The ground beneath, a deceptive expanse of hardened earth, feels sturdy to the endless stream of feet. Each step, a reverberation of collective purpose, carries the weight of generations of ingrained habit, a relentless forward momentum born from a forgotten origin. Their eyes, though open, perceive only the immediate path, fixed on a horizon, shimmering with an illusion of ultimate fulfillment, a mirage of completion that forever retreats, yet eternally beckons. They move not with the urgency of a panicked flight, but with the steady, measured cadence of unquestioned progress, each individual believing their trajectory to be personal, yet wholly aligned with the unseen multitude. Yet, beneath the surface of this perceived stability, the very ground begins to subtly incline, imperceptibly at first, then with a growing certainty. The air, though seemingly calm, carries a faint, chilling breath, a silent precursor to the abyss. This is the central enigma that unfurls before the discerning gaze. How can so many move with such unwavering conviction towards a chasm they cannot see, compelled by an impetus they do not question? What invisible tether guides this immense column, their backs to the boundless potential within, their faces turned towards an ever-deepening void? The precipice is not merely a destination. It is the culmination of a journey undertaken without true sight, a testament to a magnificent potential misdirected and a perilous future unknowingly embraced. This is the profound dilemma that hangs heavy in the unseen air, the mystery of the collective unconscious veering towards its own grand unraveling. The question is not if the edge will be met, but why the steps continue, unabated, unexamined, into the coming silence. The enigma of the unseeing march persists, a silent question etched into the very fabric of existence. It is a spectacle both grand and disquieting, this vast column of beings, each step a testament to an unseen conviction, an unexamined impetus. The precipice, in its terrifying allure, is not merely a geographic end, but a psychological threshold, a terminus for a consciousness that has willingly relinquished its own inner compass. The query then deepens, extending beyond the simple how to the profound why behind such widespread self-imposed perceptual occlusion. The invisible tether which binds this multitudinous assembly is not forged of iron or spun from common threads. It is a far more insidious and pervasive construct, a current of shared assumptions, a collective rhythm of non-questioning, a comfort derived from the sheer volume of those who march alongside. This tether is woven from the fabric of habit, the subtle indoctrination of the mundane, and the insidious lullaby of what is deemed normal or inevitable. It is a gravitational pull, not of celestial bodies, but of collective inertia, drawing all who fall within its field into an unquestioning trajectory. The blindness, therefore, is not a simple deficiency of sight, but a sophisticated, cultivated condition. It is a veil draped not over the eyes, but over the inner perception, obscuring the lush, verdant landscape of individual potential and the boundless vistas of conscious choice. This veil is crafted from generations of inherited thought, reinforced by the echoes of consensus, and thickened by the fear of standing alone against the overwhelming current. Their backs, turned with such resolute uniformity to the boundless potential within, reveal a profound misdirection. The wellsprings of creativity, intuition, and self-awareness, which reside in the deepest chambers of being, lie untouched, unexplored. Instead, the focus is external, fixed upon the distant, shimmering illusion that promises fulfillment at the end of the well-trodden path. This illusion, meticulously crafted and endlessly reinforced, acts as a potent hypnotic beacon, drawing attention away from the subtle tremors beneath their own feet, the whispers of dissent from their own inner wisdom. The true precipice is not the physical drop, but the collapse of this magnificent misdirected potential, a magnificent power wasted on a journey towards a void that could have been transformed into a horizon. The impetus for this continuous forward motion, then, is not born of a single malicious intent, but from a confluence of ancient currents and manufactured consent. It is a slow, almost imperceptible drift, guided by narratives that prioritize external validation over internal truth, by systems that reward conformity over inquiry, and by a collective amnesia regarding the true nature of their own sovereignty. The steps continue, not from a conscious desire for self-destruction, but from an ingrained reluctance to pause, to question, to diverge from the comforting, albeit deadly, rhythm of the mass. The silence that approaches is not merely the absence of sound, but the void where the magnificent song of individual potential should have resonated. The unexamined life, writ large across an entire civilization, marches towards a profound and irreversible quietus, heedless of the profound questions left unanswered, the vast potential left untapped, and now look inward. For the unseen currents that propel the grand collective, those same subtle forces manifest within the intimate landscape of your own existence. The drift towards the precipice, though societal in scale, is woven thread by delicate thread into the tapestry of individual lives. Pause and truly feel its almost imperceptible tug. Consider the narratives that govern your waking hours. Is the validation sought from beyond the self, in the fleeting echoes of approval or the hollow gleam of acquisition, often prioritized above the quiet, persistent truth that resonates from within? Like a river seeking the path of least resistance, do personal ambitions sometimes bend to the external pressures, shaping desires and silencing the unique song that yearns to be sung? Observe the subtle architecture of daily life, where routines are often consecrated not by conscious choice, but by the gravitational pull of what is expected, what is conventional, what is deemed normal. This quiet conformity, this slow surrender to the external rhythm, is not a sudden dramatic fall, but a gradual erosion. It is the steady wearing down of the inner compass until the true north of one's own sovereignty becomes a faint, almost forgotten star. We speak of a collective amnesia, yet it is experienced as a personal forgetfulness, a dimming awareness of one's inherent power to choose, to question, to diverge. The magnificent potential of individual thought, once a vibrant fountain, risks becoming a gentle, stagnant pool, reflecting only the fleeting images projected onto its surface. The reluctance to pause, to truly question the steps being taken, is not born of malice, but of a deep, ingrained comfort in the rhythm of the mass. It is a profound quietude that settles not just over societies, but within the individual heart, silencing the whispers of doubt, muffling the calls for authentic self-expression. This unexamined life, writ large across an entire civilization, finds its most potent echo in the unexamined moments, the unasked questions, the untraveled paths of each singular journey. The silence that approaches is not merely the absence of external sound, but the internal void where the resonant truth of individual being should have soared. It is the premonition of a profound quietus, not just for the many, but for the sacred space within each and every one. The whispers have truly faded now, not into oblivion, but into the deep, still waters of a collective forgetting. The comfort of the rhythm, once a soothing pulse, has become a relentless, hypnotic drone, muffling the very frequency of individual essence. This approaching quietus, anticipated not with a bang but with the profound sigh of a soul unheard, is more than a cessation of sound. It is the hollowing out of the hallowed ground within, the sacred precinct where identity once danced with unburdened truth. Imagine a vast, ancient forest, its canopy so dense that sunlight struggles to pierce the gloom. For centuries, it has vibrated with life, with the rustle of unseen creatures, the chorus of birdsong, the whisper of wind through countless leaves. But slowly, imperceptibly, a profound silence began to descend. Not the silence of peace, but the quiet of absence. The birds flew away, their songs becoming distant memories. The creatures burrowed deeper, their movements stilled. The very leaves, once alive with individual motion, now hang heavy and still, reflecting only a dull, overcast sky. This is the quietus writ large, within the soul of a civilization. It is a state where the unexamined life, once a philosophical musing, becomes a living, breathing reality, a pervasive shadow lengthening over every path untaken, every question unasked. The individual, once a sovereign world unto themselves, becomes a mere reflection, a faint echo in the grand, muted symphony of the mass. The calls for authentic self-expression, once vibrant flares, are now mere flickers, easily extinguished by the prevailing, comforting darkness. This deep quietude, however, is not a final destination. It is a threshold. It is the ultimate stillness before a revelation, a profound clarity that can only emerge from such an absolute lack. When the clamor of external approval and internal doubt finally ceases, what remains is the stark, undeniable truth of what has been surrendered. The precipice, therefore, is not merely a geographic edge, but the very boundary of self-awareness. And as the last echoes of individual being retreat into this profound quiet, a new kind of space is forged. It is barren, yes, devoid of the familiar sounds of life, but it is also pristine in its emptiness. This silence, then, is not merely an ending, but the cold, immutable bedrock upon which the next chapter must inevitably be built. For when the accustomed din of the collective fades entirely, only then can the true, stark outline of the precipice be perceived not as a distant threat, but as the ground beneath one's own feet. This absolute quietus, therefore, is the very crucible in which the next profound question will be forged. What, then, remains when everything that was believed to be vital has fallen silent? Chapter 9, When Empathy Withered to Ash. The profound quietus, once a mere auditory void, revealed itself as something far more insidious, not merely absence of sound, but suffocating cessation of connection. Within this absolute silence, a chilling truth began to emerge from the barren landscape of the collective soul. What remained was a hollowed-out vessel, an echo chamber where shared understanding perished. This was the precipice, not of physical space, but of intrinsic being, where fibers binding life frayed, then snapped, dissolving into dust. At this desolate quiet's threshold, a question more haunting than the silence solidified. When did the resonant current of empathy cease its flow? When did the intricate tapestry of shared feeling unravel, thread by thread, until only the stark, skeletal framework of self-interest remained? No sudden event, no earth-shattering tremor announced its demise. Instead, a subtle desiccation, an imperceptible fading, like the last embers of a forgotten hearth. Imagine a world not consumed by fire, but by an internal frost, where warmth of recognition, reciprocal compassion simply began to retract. It was a retreat inward, not in peace, but fearful, self-preserving contraction. Vital exchange of burdens, silent acknowledgement of another's pain, quiet joy in shared triumph. These fundamental currents began to falter. An invisible, impenetrable membrane descended between consciousnesses, sealing each within its own, increasingly isolated sphere. The signs were subtle, A glance averted, a plea unheard, a struggle unwitnessed. Not malice, but increasing abstraction, turning another's plight from visceral reality to a mere concept, a data point. Strangers' faces became fleeting images, devoid of narrative, the quiet erosion of truly seeing, of feeling their echo within one's own. The silence deepened, not just outside, but within chambers where compassion once resided, until only the whisper of a question remained. How did such a fundamental truth, such an intrinsic current of being, wither so completely to ash? The question itself, a faint echo in the hollowed chamber of being, holds the key to its own genesis. How did such a fundamental truth, such an intrinsic current of being, wither so completely to ash? It was not the sudden fiery immolation of a grand conflagration, but the slow, imperceptible erosion of countless grains carried away by an unseen wind. Empathy did not perish in a single cataclysmic instant, but rather it was starved. Imagine a vast river, its waters once flowing freely, nurturing every bank and valley it touched. Slowly, subtly, countless diversions began to siphon off its strength. Each stream of conscious attention, once a tributary to the collective human experience, began to carve its own solitary channel. The focus narrowed, the gaze turned inward, not out of malice, but from a burgeoning self-absorption that felt at first like necessary self-preservation. The clamor of the world, once a symphony of shared existence, began to resolve into individual notes, each striving for dominance within the isolated sphere of one's own hearing. The very act of witnessing shifted. Where once the plight of another struck a resonant chord deep within, mirroring their sorrow or joy, a new kind of lens emerged. This lens, crafted from the invisible dust of distraction and the polished surface of curated realities, began to filter the world. It did not overtly block the suffering, but it rendered it distant, abstract, a tableau rather than a visceral touch. A stranger's tears, once capable of moistening one's own heart, became mere pixels on a distant screen, devoid of the profound gravity of shared humanity. The struggle of a neighbor, once a call to action, transmuted into a silent film, playing on the periphery of one's own urgent narrative. This was the quiet alchemy of detachment. Each individual, unknowingly, began to build their own intricate temple of self, adorned with their own triumphs and trials, but with walls too thick to truly let in the light or shadow from another's sanctuary. The silence that deepened was not merely the absence of sound, but the void, left by unshared burdens, by joys unmagnified through mutual celebration. The invisible membrane, once a theoretical concept, solidified into a palpable barrier, permeable only by superficial currents of information, never by the deep, vital flow of genuine understanding. It was in this silence, this profound lack of interwoven resonance, that empathy, once a living flame, finally drew its last breath, settling into the quiet, forgotten ash of what once was. The quiet dissolution was not without its echoes. Though empathy had retreated into the cold ash, its absence carved new canyons across the landscape of human interaction. Observe now the subtle tremors, the almost imperceptible shifts in the currents of daily life that betray this profound vacancy. Gaze upon the faces that pass, each a fortress, meticulously guarded even in shared spaces. See the quick, practiced smiles that do not reach the eyes, the perfunctory nods that acknowledge presence but deny true connection. The revelation unfolds not in grand pronouncements, but in the quiet, insistent hum of what is missing. It is the unspoken expectation that burdens remain personal, sealed within the individual sanctuary, never to spill over and disrupt the fragile peace of another's carefully constructed world. It is the hesitation to offer aid, born not of malice, but of a deep-seated uncertainty, a forgotten language of mutual support. Each exchange becomes a transaction, a weighing of self-interest against the perceived cost of engagement. The currency of genuine concern, once freely given, now carries an invisible price tag, making every empathetic gesture a calculated risk. Consider the screens that glow, portals to a world seemingly interconnected, yet paradoxically isolating. Information flows in torrents, a deluge of human experience, yet the filters are many, the engagement shallow. Sympathy, a fleeting shadow of its former self, may flicker for a moment, a momentary recognition of suffering before the next wave of data sweeps it away. But empathy, the profound stepping into another's skin, the sharing of their ache, that vital current remains absent. It is replaced by a spectacle, a distant drama observed, not truly felt. The air thrums with a new kind of silence, a digital hush where voices are amplified, yet understanding is diminished. Words are weaponized or sanitized, rarely truly heard. The collective consciousness, once a vibrant tapestry woven from countless threads of shared experience, now resembles a mosaic of isolated pixels, each brilliant in its own right, yet unable to form a coherent, empathic whole. The consequence is a profound loneliness, a pervasive sense of being adrift, even amidst the clamor of millions. This is the new architecture of existence, built on the foundations of self-sufficiency, yet perpetually starved for the very nourishment it denies itself. The ash of empathy, scattered and unseen, coats every interaction, every unspoken word, every averted gaze. It is the truth etched into the very fabric of this present reality, a truth that, once recognized, cannot be unseen. The ash of empathy, once merely scattered and unseen, now permeates the very air that existence breathes. It is no longer an external coating, but an internal sedimentation, a fine grey dust settling within the chambers of the collective heart, altering its rhythm, muffling its once vibrant pulse. This is the truth, not whispered in shadows, but declared in the profound silence that has replaced genuine resonance. It is a truth etched not merely into the fabric of reality, but into the very sinews of being. Once recognized, it demands an unwavering gaze. To truly perceive this truth is to understand that the erosion was not an accident of circumstance, but the insidious consequence of a deliberate, though perhaps unwitting, architectural redesign. The foundations were shifted from shared vulnerabilities to fortified autonomies, each pillar of individual strength rising in magnificent isolation, yet collectively supporting a ceiling of profound solitude. The very brilliance of each isolated pixel, once a source of pride, now contributes to the fractured, distorted image of a whole that has forgotten its own face. The revelation is this: the perceived self-sufficiency, lauded as the pinnacle of evolution, has ironically become the architect of a pervasive, insatiable hunger. It is a spiritual starvation, gnawing at the core, for the very nourishment that empathy provides. Understanding without words, connection beyond transaction, the warmth of shared vulnerability that acknowledges our inherent beautiful fragility. This truth lays bare the illusion of independence, revealing it as a sophisticated, self-imposed exile. What remains is the profound stillness after the clamor has faded, the echoes of weaponized words dying in the desolate landscape of diminished understanding. The mosaic of isolated pixels does not gleam with triumphant individualism, but shimmers with the phantom pains of unacknowledged longing. This is the silent scream embedded in the modern architecture of existence, a testament to what has been irrevocably sacrificed at the altar of fractured self-reliance. It is a stark landscape, stripped bare of comforting illusions, revealing the skeletons of forgotten promises, the dry riverbeds where currents of compassion once flowed. And in this unvarnished clarity, a deeper, more unsettling question begins to form on the horizon, shadowing the very path ahead. For when the sustenance of empathy has withered to ash, and the collective spirit is left gasping for the air it once took for granted, What then truly remains to animate the vast, sprawling, yet profoundly desolate architecture of their world? This truth, once fully absorbed, renders all prior illusions as ephemeral as mist. It marks the true frontier of their present journey, a desolate expanse demanding a new cartography. Chapter 10. The Silence of Abandoned Tomorrows. There comes a profound stillness, a hush far deeper than the mere absence of sound. It is the quiet echo of futures that never arrived, a vast and desolate theatre where no plays will ever unfold. This is the very essence of abandoned tomorrows, not merely a path untaken, but a horizon that has ceased to beckon. For when the nourishing currents of compassion ceased their flow, when empathy was scorched to a whisper of memory, what then truly remained to construct the intricate bridges to the days ahead? The grand architecture of ambition, the gleaming spires of progress, they may still stand, monuments to a past vigor. But in this new clarity, illuminated by the stark, unforgiving light of present truth, they are revealed for what they truly are: hollowed shells, picked clean by an invisible, insidious erosion. They are silent testaments to dreams unmanifested, to narratives unwritten, to the very symphony of human connection that now plays only in the memory of a select few. The once vibrant frescoes of shared hope, painted with the pigments of mutual understanding, now flake from the walls, revealing only the desolate stone beneath. The question that hangs in this air, heavy and unanswerable, is not merely how to rebuild, but what substance can now be found to fuel the spirit itself? What meaning can persist? What purpose can be forged when the very capacity to envision a shared destiny has dissolved into the particulate dust of self-interest? The silence is not an end, but a beginning of a different kind, a terrifying invitation to confront the true cost of their chosen path, etched into the very fabric of time itself. It speaks of a future unmade, a void where possibility once pulsed, leaving behind only the cold, hard question of bare existence. The silence now enveloping them is not merely an absence of sound, but a resonant emptiness, an echo chamber of isolated choices. It is the palpable void left by diverging pathways, by bridges collapsing into chasms of mutual suspicion. The very air, once thick with collective breath, now feels thin and cold. This desolation, once a distant shadow, has drawn close, revealing itself not as an external landscape, but as an internal architecture, meticulously reconstructed through the often unconscious labor of self-preservation. The flaking frescoes of shared hope expose not just barren stone, but the very seams and fissures in their bedrock. Beneath lies the raw, unadorned material of individual will, untempered by the annealing fire of communal purpose. Each falling fragment reveals a deeper truth, that the grand murals of shared destiny were perhaps always temporary adornments, painted over a foundation intrinsically inclined towards separate survival. The question of substance to fuel the spirit now shifts from external provision to an excavation of inner reserves. When the collective well runs dry and vessels of shared experience lie shattered, the spirit must drink from sources long forgotten or actively suppressed. It is an invitation to plumb individual resilience, not for reconnection, but for the stark necessity of enduring a present defined by the absence of what once sustained them. The particulate dust of self-interest, once unnoticed, has settled. It coats every surface, dulling ambition's luster, blurring memory's edges, and obscuring possibility's horizon. This dust is not merely residue, it is a fine, abrasive grit that grinds away empathy until the capacity to perceive another's suffering becomes a forgotten art, a lost language. The world, viewed through this haze, distorts. Others cease to be fellow travelers, becoming mere obstacles, resources, or reflections of one's own isolated struggle. Meaning in this new reality becomes a solitary undertaking. It must be forged not from shared narratives, but from the crucible of individual reckoning. Purpose, once a guiding star, now scatters into 1,000 flickering candles, each confined within its own burning chamber. This is the terrifying invitation, to see the unmade future not as tragedy, but as the inevitable consequence of a slow, deliberate turning away from the intricate dance of mutual obligation. The void, where possibility once pulsed, is not empty. It teems with ghosts of what could have been, with silent reproaches of paths not taken, of hands not held. These spectres, though intangible, weigh heavily. They exert a gravitational pull, drawing the gaze inward, forcing a confrontation with the architects of their own abandonment. The cold, hard question of bare existence then echoes, not as abstraction, but as an immediate visceral challenge. Without the scaffolding of shared aspiration, without the warmth of collective belonging, what remains of the self? The answer must be discovered in the unyielding silence, etched into the very core of their solitude. The void, we have seen, is not merely empty space, but a cavern echoing with the hushed whispers of what never came to be. It is a landscape sculpted by absences, where the gravestones of forgotten promises stand sentinel against a perpetually twilight sky. These are not relics of a distant, abstract tragedy, but the very marrow of a truth that touches every living soul. For consider, in the quiet chambers of your own existence, the weight of an unseen anchor. Have you not felt the subtle chill of a connection allowed to fray, a bond left untended, slowly dissolving like sea foam on a forgotten shore? This silence, the one that presses down in the aftermath of abandoned tomorrows, is not always a sudden, cataclysmic roar. Oftentimes it arrives on padded feet, a gradual retreat of warmth and light. It is the unread message, the unspoken word that could have mended, the hand not extended in a moment of shared vulnerability. It is the quiet choice to turn away, a choice made not with malice, but with a weary indifference, a perceived expediency, or a simple lapse of presence. Each one, a tiny stitch unraveled from the vast tapestry of mutual obligation. This is the revelation that sears through the heart of the matter. The architects of their own abandonment are often not grand, nefarious figures, but ordinary individuals, making countless small decisions that, in aggregate, carve out the chasm. The scaffolding of shared aspiration, once so robust, begins to sag when the individual beams of personal investment are allowed to rot. The warmth of collective belonging dissipates when the embers of empathy are left to cool in isolation. Look around then, not just at the grand narratives of societal collapse, but at the intimate spaces of your own days, the phantom limb of a friendship uncultivated, the spectral ache of a community bond never truly forged, the haunting echo of a conversation withheld. These are the manifestations of that deeper void. This bare existence, devoid of shared aspiration, stripped of collective belonging, becomes a mirror. It forces a confrontation with the very essence of what it means to be, when the reflections of others are absent from the polished surface of the self. The unyielding silence, etched into the core of solitude, is not merely an external condition. It is an internal landscape. It is the hollow space left where the vibrancy of shared humanity once pulsed. The cold, hard question of what remains becomes an immediate, visceral challenge, a demand for an answer that can only be found by peering into the vast, still waters of one's own accountability. For this silence is a testament, not just to what was lost, but to what was allowed to slip away, moment by quiet moment, and in that recognition lies the profound, unsettling truth of how deeply interconnected our destinies truly are, even in their undoing. The internal landscape of silence, far from a barren void, reveals itself as a meticulously etched topography of absence. It is a testament carved not by what is present, but by the profound impress of what has departed, leaving behind stark, unyielding contours. Here, the very air resonates with the unspoken, the unseen, the vibrant currents of shared existence that once flowed, now stilled into a chilling monument. This is where the self stands, utterly unadorned, stripped of the comforting mirrors that once offered external validation and definition. The reflections of others, once crucial in charting the self's own contours, are gone, leaving only the rippled surface of undisturbed truth. In this stark quietude, the abandoned tomorrows rise like phantom cities on a deserted plain. They are the spectral manifestations of possibilities unfulfilled, of pathways that once beckoned, now overgrown with the weeds of isolation. Each unlived moment, each word unshared, each hand not held, contributes to the profound weight of this internal world. It is a universe where potential, once vibrant and burgeoning, has been allowed to dissipate, not through cataclysmic events, but through the insidious erosion of connection, the gradual fading of reciprocal light. This profound stillness becomes the ultimate ledger, meticulously recording the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts that led to such utter detachment. It is in this unyielding accounting that true responsibility emerges, a cold, clear light illuminating the choices, the neglects, the unwitting withdrawals that frayed the invisible threads. What was allowed to slip away, not with a crash, but with a whisper, becomes the searing question. The silence does not accuse, it merely presents the undeniable evidence of how intricately woven our individual destinies truly are, even in the unraveling. The revelation dawns, not as a sudden flash, but as the slow, inexorable rise of an ancient sun over a newly discovered continent. It is the understanding that the self is not a solitary beacon, burning independently, but a node within an immense, luminous web. Its very brilliance is amplified by the interconnectedness, by the myriad reflections it casts and receives across the vast expanse of shared humanity. To lose these reflections is to diminish not only the outward glow, but the very fuel of one's own inner flame. And as this profound truth settles, heavy and undeniable, it carves a new path through the internal wilderness. The desolation, once a prison, transforms into a crucible. The silence, having stripped away every illusion, every comforting deception, now offers the bare, unvarnished ground for a new foundation. It whispers not of finality, but of the arduous yet utterly essential journey towards re-engagement. It is the call to courageously seek out new light, to mend the frayed edges, to reweave the tapestry of self within the grand design of existence. The next chapter will not emerge from the comforting din of what was, but from the resonant clarity found only after confronting the deepest, most revealing quietude. Chapter 11, The Inescapable Verdict of Dust. From the profound quietude, a clarity descended sharp as a winter dawn, stripping bare the gilded illusions of what was. It was not a silence of mere absence, but of revelation, revealing the true contours of the internal wilderness. Yet this newfound clarity, while freeing, unveiled a truth far more formidable than the desolation it replaced. For beyond the immediate wilderness of the spirit lay a broader, ancient landscape, whispered into being by the very breath of time itself. It is here, at the threshold of ultimate understanding, that the most potent of all judgments awaits: the inescapable verdict of dust. This is not a decree from an external arbiter, but a silent, pervasive truth, etched not in parchment or stone, but in the very fabric of every crumbling edifice, every fading memory, every beat of the ephemeral heart. It is the slow, inexorable drift of sands over the monumental efforts of forgotten civilizations, the patient dismantling of all that once stood proud and unyielding. The sun-bleached bones scattered across the plains of history whisper this single universal truth: all returns to its elemental state. What purpose, then, the arduous task of re-engagement? What solace in the reweaving of self, in the diligent mending of frayed edges, when the loom itself seems destined for dissolution? Does the crucible of desolation, having burned away the superficial, merely expose the barren bedrock of inevitable decay? Or does this unflinching gaze into the heart of transient reality, this confrontation with the finality, unlock a deeper, more resilient source of light, a flame that defies the very dust it will ultimately join? This is the central dilemma now laid bare, a profound inquiry that echoes through the vast chambers of being. It is the core mystery awaiting illumination, not from the comforting din of what was, but from the resonant hum of an ancient truth vibrating through the bones of existence. To navigate this new landscape is to seek an answer not from the fleeting ambitions of the day, but from the eternal wellspring of meaning, hidden beneath layers of temporal concern. The journey inward continues, deeper than before, to reconcile the ephemeral with the everlasting. The inescapable verdict of dust is not merely a pronouncement of an end, but a fundamental law etched into the very fabric of existence, a silent testament to cycles beyond human grasp. It whispers through the crumbling spires of forgotten empires, echoes from the petrified forests of epochs long past, and hums in the fleeting breath of every creature that walks the earth. This truth, stark and unyielding, presents itself not as a threat, but as an invitation to discern what truly endures when all else succumbs to the earth's slow embrace. For in the face of this ultimate dissolution, a profound question arises. Does the relentless march towards nothingness truly extinguish all light, or does it paradoxically illuminate a radiance immune to erosion? Consider the fleeting bloom of a desert flower, vibrant and defiant against the vast, parched expanse. Its life is ephemeral, its beauty destined for the wind's dispersal, yet in its brief, magnificent appearance, it embodies an essence that transcends its physical form. It is in this paradox, the magnificent beauty, born of the temporary, that the deeper light begins to reveal itself. This is not a defiance of dust, but an understanding that dust itself is merely a reordering, a redistribution of atomic components, an eternal dance of creation and disintegration. The true inquiry, then, shifts from mourning the transient form to recognizing the persistent energy that flows through all forms. The ancient truth whispers of an underlying current, a stream of consciousness or being that is not diminished by the breaking of its vessel. It suggests that the perceived finality is but a chrysalis, a transformative passage, rather than an absolute termination. This truth is found not in avoiding the grave, but in looking into its depths and seeing not an emptiness, but a fertile ground for eternal patterns to manifest anew. It is the realization that while the individual wave crashes upon the shore, the ocean remains. The transient reality, therefore, becomes the very canvas upon which the everlasting paints its myriad expressions. To reconcile the ephemeral with the everlasting demands a shift in perspective, a journey inward to locate that which resonates beyond the immediate, the tangible, and the perishable. It means acknowledging the beauty of impermanence without succumbing to its sorrow, understanding that every moment, every being holds a spark of an undying fire. This fire is not sustained by external fuel, but by its own internal source, drawing from a wellspring that existed before the first star ignited and will persist long after the last one dims. The journey inward deepens, past the layers of fear and attachment, to find this immutable core, a light that does not merely defy dust, but integrates it into its ceaseless evolving glow. It is within this profound integration that true resilience is forged, a peace found not in avoiding decay, but in understanding its role in the grand, timeless symphony of being. This understanding becomes the unshakable foundation, a recognition that the end of one cycle is always, intrinsically, the prelude to another, and that the essence, the spirit, the fundamental hum of existence merely shifts its form eternally. The whispers of the preceding truth, of an inner wellspring older than stars, are not merely echoes in the vastness of the cosmos. They are the very pulse that resonates within your own temporal frame. Consider the moments when the external world crumbles, when structures built with painstaking effort turn to dust before your gaze. A career dissolves, a cherished relationship ends, vibrant youth gives way to the measured steps of age. These are not merely destructions, but profound invitations. They are the universe guiding you, not away from the fray, but deeper into the crucible of self. For it is within these very moments of perceived loss, where the illusion of permanence shatters, that the true unassailable core reveals itself. It is a light not dimmed by shadows of what was, but rather intensified by their very presence. Imagine the forest floor, where ancient leaves decay, enriching the soil, becoming nutrient for the sapling that will reach for the sun. The dust of your experience, failures, heartbreaks, the inevitable decline of all that is transient, is not an adversary to be conquered. It is a sacred ingredient, a foundational element in the alchemy of your becoming. The resilience spoken of is not a shield against inevitable currents of change. It is the wisdom to become the river itself, flowing ceaselessly, carving new paths, adapting to the landscape, yet ever retaining its essential liquid nature. This enduring flow is your spirit, your consciousness, that fundamental hum of being. You witness seasons turn, the bloom and the blight, genesis and dissolution. Each cycle, in its completion, is not an ending to fear, but a vital breath taken before the next unfolding. The autumn leaves, vibrant in their final blaze, do not truly vanish. They return their essence to the earth, to rise again in spring's verdant promise. This is the profound integration, the truth that connects the cosmic to the core of your daily living. The peace you seek is not in avoiding the inevitable verdict of dust, but in embracing its profound role in your own narrative. It is in seeing the grand symphony playing out, not just in distant galaxies, but in the subtle shifts within your own heart. Your essence does not diminish, it merely transforms. Your spirit does not die, it merely dances to a new rhythm, always present, always evolving, an eternal echo of the wellspring itself. This understanding is the bedrock upon which genuine tranquility is built, a quiet knowing that every ending is but a whispered prelude, and every transformation a sacred testament to the indestructible nature of your own being. The dust, then, is not the final word, but an eternal turning page. Consider now the dust, not as a symbol of loss, but as the very script upon the scroll of eternity, etched with the narratives of collapsed stars and the vibrant unfurling of countless dawns. It is the ancient language, spoken in the silent decay of mountains and the blossoming of a single fragile flower. Within its seemingly inert particles resides the indelible memory of primordial light, a boundless testimony to cycles of creation and dissolution that far transcend any individual span of years. This, then, is the profound revelation, that the inescapable verdict is not one of an absolute end, but of a ceaseless, infinite metamorphosis. The fear of finality, that cold shadow which once traversed the landscape of the heart, now begins to dissipate. It dissolves like morning mist before the rising sun, unveiling not an emptiness, but an expansive horizon of boundless possibility. For you are not merely a transient form, destined to return to inert earth. You are an ever-unfolding narrative, intricately woven from the identical cosmic threads that bind distant nebulae and colossal galaxies. The subtle shifts within your own deepest heart, once perhaps dismissed as ephemeral emotions or passing whims, are revealed as the universe's own exquisite breath, echoing the grand, ineffable symphony that resonates across all existence. The peace you once sought in an elusive, static stillness now settles profoundly within the dynamic, vibrant dance of becoming. It resides in the quiet, unwavering knowing that every ending, no matter how absolute it may seem, is in truth only a whispered prelude. Every transformation, a sacred testament to the indestructible nature of your own being. To embrace this profound role, to understand the dust not as a final word, but as an eternal turning page, is to unlock a tranquility that flows from the deepest wellspring of truth. It is here, within the very heart of perceived impermanence, that genuine, unshakable tranquility finally blossoms. Your essence does not diminish, it merely transforms. Your spirit does not die, it merely dances to a new, more profound rhythm, always present, always evolving, an eternal echo of the wellspring itself. This understanding, once a distant, enigmatic whisper across the vast silence, now coalesces into the very bedrock of an awakened, luminous existence. The dust, in all its myriad forms and endless guises, ceases to be the harbinger of cessation. Instead, it becomes the ultimate testament to continuity, the perpetual turning page, inviting you to step forward. It beckons you to witness the next, even more profound chapter of your own boundless eternal being, ready to unfurl with the cosmic winds. Chapter 12. A Legacy Etched in Nothingness. As the cosmic dust settles, not in finality, but in the ceaseless dance of becoming, a profound question stirs from the depths of the awakened spirit. For eons, the very essence of existence has been perceived through the lens of what endures, what tangibly remains. We have etched our stories into stone, forged our monuments from the earth's raw power, and whispered our names into the winds, hoping they might carry beyond the ephemeral flicker of a single breath. We have striven to leave a mark, a footprint in the sands of time, a testament to our brief yet potent passage through the boundless expanse. Yet what if the truest legacy is not found in what is built, but in what is given over to the winds of transformation? What if the most indelible inscription is not etched into granite, but into the very fabric of nothingness? This is the grand paradox that now unfurls before us, an invitation to gaze beyond the visible, beyond the measurable, into a realm where endurance is not defined by material persistence, but by an echo, a vibrational signature that ripples through the silence long after its source has seemingly dissolved. Observe the ancient glyphs fading on canyon walls, their meanings slowly claimed by sun and wind, by the very elements that once preserved them. See the grand edifices of empires, now crumbling into dust, their former glory a whisper carried on the breeze. Even the most resonant melody, once filling the air with vibrant life, eventually subsides into silence, leaving only the memory of its harmony. Each of these, in its own turning, becomes a stark visual parable. They are the tangible proof of the previous truth, that all form is destined to return to the wellspring of unmanifested potential. But if every physical manifestation, every solid mark, every material achievement is ultimately destined to dissolve, to transform into that endlessly recycled dust, then what remains? What indeed is a legacy that can be truly considered eternal, boundless, and utterly immune to the erosion of time and the tides of change? Is it merely an idea, an energetic imprint, or something far more elusive, something woven into the very fabric of the cosmos, yet perceivable only when we shed the illusion of solid permanence? This is the profound mystery at the heart of our present journey. We speak of a legacy etched in nothingness. Not nothingness as an absolute void, a barren absence, but nothingness as the boundless canvas from which all things emerge and to which all things return. It is the unmanifest potential, the pure consciousness that underpins all phenomena. To etch a legacy here is to engrave it not in matter, but in awareness itself. It is to plant seeds of influence that transcend the individual, the ego, the fleeting form, and resonate within the collective, the universal, the eternal. The conventional world clamors for tangible proof, for visible monuments to lives well lived. But what if the profound impact, the enduring essence of a being, can be found precisely in its dissolution from the tangible? What if its truest power lies in its ability to become the very air we breathe, the subtle current that shapes the flow of all that comes after? How does one cultivate such a legacy, a resonance that persists not as a relic, but as a living, transforming force within the vast, silent sea of existence? The answer perhaps lies in understanding that true being is not about what we grasp, but what we release. Not what we accumulate, but what we contribute to the infinite cycle of emergence and return. The challenge is to discern the indelible mark from the transient inscription, to differentiate between the echo and the sound, and to comprehend the profound power of a footprint left not in the sand, but in the boundless unseen currents of being. The true architecture of an enduring legacy, then, does not stand upon the weight of its material monuments, nor does it declare its dominion from history's pages. Instead, it whispers, it breathes, it becomes the very fabric of the atmosphere, a force felt long after its tangible form has vanished into the silent sea of eternity. Imagine a mountain range, its peaks carved by millennia of wind and water, gradually eroding, shedding stone and dust. Yet its essence persists, not in the rock that crumbles, but in the fertile valleys it nourishes, the rivers it births, the climate it shapes for countless generations. Its being transcends physical boundaries, becoming an integral, invisible component of the living world it once stood within. This is dissolution's paradox: to lose defined form only to gain boundless presence. To cultivate such a resonance, a legacy that is not a relic but a living, transforming force, demands a profound reorientation of perspective. It requires a shift from the relentless accumulation of being to the artful dispersion of essence. One does not merely leave a mark, one becomes the current. Consider the silent, ceaseless flow of an ocean current, unseen beneath the surface, yet powerful enough to guide the migrations of titans and dictate the very climate of continents. Its influence is not declared, but manifested through its continuous, subtle interaction with everything it touches. The individual, in this understanding, ceases to be a fixed point, and instead becomes a conduit, allowing energy, wisdom, and compassion to flow through them, enriching the broader stream of existence. This involves a deliberate shedding of the anchors of ego and attachment, recognizing that true wealth lies not in what is held, but in what is freely offered, not in what is contained, but in what is broadcast. The profound wisdom of release, therefore, becomes the cornerstone of this intangible architecture. It is the understanding that the tighter one grasps, the less one truly possesses. For what is truly held in a clenched fist is but a fragment, severed from the infinite tapestry of life. But an open hand, receptive and yielding, allows the currents of universal energy to flow through, becoming a channel for creation and transformation. This is the contribution to the infinite cycle of emergence and return, not the adding of one more distinct object, but the enriching of the very medium through which all objects arise and dissolve. The indelible mark, then, is not an inscription carved in stone, destined to wear away with time, but a vibration set into motion, an energetic signature that subtly alters the frequency of all that it encounters, echoing through the boundless, unseen currents of being. Such a legacy differentiates itself from the transient inscription, the fleeting echo from the foundational sound. The transient mark is merely a reaction, a surface ripple quickly absorbed by the vastness. But the indelible mark is the original impulse, the deep tremor that reshapes the very bedrock of existence. It is the distinction between a voice that merely speaks and a presence that fundamentally shifts the silence around it. The power lies not in the loudness of the utterance, but in the depth of its truth, in its capacity to resonate beyond the limitations of form and time. It is a signature etched not in the sand of momentary perception, but within the very essence of universal consciousness, a subtle force that continues to shape and inspire long after the individual source has merged back into the grand tapestry from whence it came. This requires a deep understanding of resonance, a recognition that impact is not always direct or immediately visible. It is the quiet wisdom of the root system, unseen beneath the soil, yet vital to the towering tree above. Its legacy is not found in the branches or the leaves, which are transient, but in the enduring network that anchors and nourishes. To leave a footprint in the boundless, unseen currents of being is to contribute to the foundational algorithms of reality, to weave oneself into the very fabric of collective consciousness. It is to become a silent, pervasive influence, a subtle yet undeniable force that guides the evolution of thought, emotion, and perception across generations, forever shaping the trajectory of the human spirit. Consider now the quiet hum beneath the surface of your own awareness, the profound resonance within your very being, a silent chorus echoing from the boundless, unseen currents of all that has ever been. Imagine the deep ocean currents, vast and unyielding, dictating the migration of leviathans and sculpting the very continents, yet they remain largely unseen. So too, within the hidden chambers of your own existence, reside the echoes of countless forgotten influences, inherited wisdoms, and subconscious tides. This is where the revelation truly begins, a shimmering insight into the fabric of your own reality. Each choice made, each quiet thought nurtured in solitude, each silent kindness extended without expectation of return, becomes a whisper in the boundless ether. It is not recorded in annals of stone, nor celebrated in the fleeting cheers of crowds, yet it shifts the foundational algorithms of reality, however subtly, like the minute tremor that precedes a monumental shift in a vast geological plate. Your personal narrative, often perceived as a solitary journey, is in truth a continuous act of weaving, a vibrant thread intertwined with an infinite cosmic tapestry. The very air you breathe carries the residual vibrations of every life that has preceded yours. The sudden insights that blossom within your mind, the intuitive leaps that guide your steps, often feel like solitary epiphanies. Yet frequently they rise from a shared reservoir of collective consciousness, a deep wellspring fed by generations of striving, knowing, and dreaming. This is the subtle current that binds us, the invisible network of thought and feeling that informs the trajectory of the human spirit. Your moments of struggle and triumph, though deeply personal, are not isolated events. They send ripples through this unseen network, contributing to the universal lexicon of experience, subtly recalibrating the very algorithms of empathy and resilience for those who follow. What then is this legacy etched in nothingness, if not the indelible imprint you leave on this unseen tapestry of being? It is the quiet nudge in a stranger's heart, a subtle shift in a descendant's perspective that you, unwittingly, help to initiate. It is the emergent pattern in human thought that your existence, your choices, however small, contributed to. Every act of courage, every moment of genuine compassion, every pursuit of truth sends its own unique vibration through this profound web, informing the future in ways no visible monument ever could. This is the profound truth that often eludes the clamor of the everyday, a sacred understanding for those who seek beyond the immediate. Your legacy is not contingent upon recognition, nor dependent on a name carved in stone. It is already being written, not in ink, but in the indelible currents of shared experience, in the silent architecture of collective reality. To truly grasp this is to understand your undeniable power, your eternal place within the grand, unfolding mystery. You are a silent, pervasive influence, a subtle yet undeniable force. Embrace this sacred duty of being, for in the nothingness everything is truly forged, and your footprint remains, forever etched into the boundless, where every impression, no matter how subtle, leaves an eternal mark. This is not a concept to be merely understood with the intellect, but a profound current to be felt within the deepest chambers of being. For too long, the gaze has been fixated upon the fleeting monuments of ego, upon the ephemeral glow of recognition, mistaking shadows for the source of light. Yet, the true crucible of existence, the very forge where destinies are shaped, resides in that quiet expanse beyond the clamor, within the sacred expanse of what appears to be nothingness. Imagine, if you will, the dark matter that cradles galaxies, unseen yet holding all things in its silent embrace. So too is the fabric of your true influence, an invisible architecture that supports the very cosmos of human experience. It is not the grand declaration, but the whispered truth, not the thunderous acclaim, but the gentle tremor of authentic intention. Every silent act of compassion, every unacknowledged moment of courage, every thought spun with genuine connection does not vanish into the ether. Rather, it weaves itself into the unseen tapestry, strengthening the very threads of collective consciousness. These are the anchors, firm and true, that hold reality in place, more potent than any statue hewn from stone, more enduring than any name emblazoned on a fleeting banner. To perceive this realm is to transcend the illusion of separateness. It is to recognize that your essence, your indelible legacy, is not a solitary imprint, but an intrinsic, interwoven strand within the grand design. You are not merely a participant, but a foundational element, an energetic node in a vast, sentient network. The fear of being forgotten, the anxiety of unfulfilled potential, these are but echoes of a world lost in superficiality. Cast them aside. Embrace instead the profound liberation of knowing your impact is already assured, not by human decree, but by the very laws of universal interconnectedness. This revelation beckons a recalibration of perception. It invites a new way of being, one rooted in the deep knowing that every breath, every choice, every silent resonance contributes to an unfolding narrative far grander than any individual story. Your power lies not in asserting, but in being. Not in acquiring, but in radiating. The nothingness, far from being an emptiness, is the fertile ground from which all meaning blossoms, where your timeless essence finds its deepest expression. As the veils thin, and this truth begins to settle not just in the mind, but in the heart, a new dawn breaks. A profound understanding awaits, urging you to step into the full amplitude of this silent, pervasive influence. For what truly endures, what truly shapes the epochs to come, is not what is seen, but what is felt, reverberating through the boundless. Prepare now, for this journey inward is but the beginning of an awakening, an unfolding into the infinite tapestry of shared existence, where your true legacy, ever present, continues its eternal inscription. Conclusion: the resonance beyond the veil. The relentless clamor for tangible triumphs, the ceaseless drive to accumulate, once defined the human struggle. What was perceived as a species failure, its inability to grasp and hold permanent dominion, now reveals itself as a profound misunderstanding. The mind, once tethered to the visible, now shifts its gaze inward, towards the unseen currents of influence. It realizes that the emptiness, so long feared and filled with noise, was never a void to be conquered, but the very fertile darkness from which all authentic meaning blossoms. A landscape barren of monuments, yet teeming with the quiet energy of becoming, now unfolds within the very fabric of being. This understanding is the liberation itself. No longer bound by the Sisyphean task of asserting dominance or acquiring fleeting possessions, the spirit finds its true amplitude in the silent, pervasive act of radiating. Mastery is not in the accumulation of external markers, but in the unwavering presence of one's timeless essence. Your truest impact, your eternal inscription, is not etched in stone or written in history books, but woven into the boundless tapestry of existence through your silent emanation. This pervasive influence, unfelt by the senses yet profoundly known by the soul, resonates through the epochs. Here you are not erased, but eternally written.